I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you right now. We have a what appears to be a very serious. Is that the World Trade Tower?
Yeah.
This is
Mark. A plane hit it? They think so.
This is one of the towers of the World Trade Center in Manhattan, which is clearly heavily involved in a smoke situation, and one would assume there is fire.
Mark, I heard from somebody who spoke to someone in the building. They just called me and they said they were told to evacuate and that they were told that a plane had hit the building. Now, again, I spoke to one of my Wall Street sources who said they had just heard from somebody at a Wall Street firm that has some offices in the building that they were told to evacuate and that a plane had hit the World Trade Center.
Now, you can see from this perspective that I would say about the top 15 or 20% of this building is affected in one way or another. We don't know whether the smoke condition originated on a lower floor and is working up, or is in the middle and working both ways. And as you can see, we really can't tell from these pictures whether there is any fire involved. It would seem to be a reasonable assumption given what we're seeing, but you never know. But this is obviously a very large problem of some sort. One would feel safe in saying there's a fire in there somewhere, and
well,
it's big. I mean, it has a lot of the building involved here.
We can only hope, Mark, given the time, that many people were not yet at work.
That is correct. That's a very good point. That is a 9 to 5 kind of environment, that building, although obviously many people would be there in the off hours, but the majority would not be coming to work until about 10 minutes from now.
It is also in the financial district, of course, on the west side of southern Manhattan, right near the World Financial Center, where a lot of Wall Street firms have their offices as well, not far from the New York Stock Exchange. You can imagine that area is going to be filled with a lot of emergency vehicles, probably starting right now.
Again, we are looking at it from the west side looking east, correct?
I think so.
This camera is in Jersey City?
Yeah.
Matt Quayle, let us know when you can. I believe we're looking at it from...
It looks like the south building.
It does look like the south building. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. The report continues to be that a plane hit the World Trade Center.
That is what I was told, Mark, again by somebody.
From here it looks like the north building.
I believe it is the north building, and because that's the Empire State Building in the foreground. So it is the north building, and it looks to me like there's a rather large hole in this north side of the north building. I'm talking about the way the smoke is coming out of that side of the building, roughly. Again, what strikes me is how many floors are involved. This is a very large part of this building.
You see the debris coming out.
Yes, and this, by the way, there are an awful lot of people who work in the Twin Towers have their own zip code. There are so many people who work there, and there are so many offices there.
They recently sold, in fact, by the Port Authority of New York to an investment group, Mark.
It does appear to be... the damage does appear to be probably has originated on the north side of the North Tower, but we are still details very sketchy, and a lot of it is speculation until we can nail it down. But there does not appear to be any major damage. For example, on the side that we're looking that is closest to the camera here, there does appear to be major damage to the exterior of the building from the north side. And I think it's also safe to say there is a significant fire going on inside that building right now.
That hole, I guess it's hard to estimate.
See what I'm talking about? That entire area seems to be gone. Seems to have been crashed in somehow.
And obviously high up. Hard to say exactly what floors, but certainly the highest floors, somewhat above the very top, the observation deck there. You can see.
How many floors are there? About
103.
103.
I believe is how many floors. And I think that is the tower with the observation deck. You can see, well, that's the one that's got the antenna there. that a lot of New York relies on.
I mean, that's restricted.
That reminds me, this could also lead to an interruption in broadcasting in some New York TV stations, so be alert to that possibility. But these are remarkable pictures, frankly.
Mark, that's restricted airspace, right? I mean, there's no plane supposed to be around there, right?
No, and this is why.
Well, that's what I mean. But I mean, what do we start? I mean, you know, I guess that's the conjecture.
And Mark, I should point out the observation deck is on the other building, on the other tower.
The one without the antenna.
Without the antenna, that's right.
Yeah. Now you see
no smoke's breaking out on
the damage. The damage appears to be fairly widespread. I mean, you've got smoke, you've got broken windows on the face that we're looking at now. That's a considerable distance from the wall that faces north, which appears to be where the major damage is. And now you can see flames. Yeah.
Bottom right.
All right. Now we definitely have a fire situation. Not that we thought it wasn't, but you know, you can't. You don't want to jump to conclusions. I remember when the what was it? TWA
exactly.
Flight 800 went down. The initial reaction was, well, it had to be a bomb because the 747 is such a safe plane, and it turned out not to be.
There's no reason.
So you don't want to get ahead of yourself.
But you would figure that
what's going on.
That planes are not supposed to be flying around there.
Mark, on the wires.
What's concerning me is the fact that this appears to be still spreading.
Yeah, on the wires, Mark, we should point out that witnesses are saying it was a twin-engine plane that flew right into the northern tower there of the World Trade Center. A twin-engine plane, at least on the wires, according to witnesses.
Now this is an ironic shot to be taking right now. Go back to that shot of Empire in the foreground, because the Empire State Building itself was hit by an airplane. A B-25 bomber crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building around the time of World War II. I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly when. This has happened before, ironically, to these two buildings. The first one was Empire. Now this morning we have an airplane of some kind. We believe a twin-engine civilian craft of some sort, I would assume.
It does not say at this point, Mark, again, relying on wire reports here, relying on witnesses. They simply say...
We have people going to the scene, by the way, to try and...
Yeah, huge explosion, and, well, you can see the damage that's been inflicted. And we can only hope, again, given the fact that it was fairly early, that many people were not yet in their offices, and that most of that area, the Trade Center, was vacant. We can hope.
Of course, the worst thing could well be, and this is totally conjecture, that, you know, on a clear day, you know, someone doesn't miss seeing that. Obviously, this could be a suicide mission.
Ah, boy, yeah, that hadn't occurred to me.
Well, that's what I meant. Why would, well, I don't, you know, you just don't want to conjecture.
That's true. Well, a bomber that flew into the Empire State Building did so at night and in bad weather. This obviously is a different situation, and you can see now that there is obviously a fire situation that is, I don't know whether it's out of control, but it's certainly severe. And as we watch, at least the external indications are that it's getting worse. I think we can now pretty much make out a very large hole in the north side of, and again, you're looking at the North Tower. But it looks like that area toward the top of the tower, as you're looking at it now, that looks to me like a very large area broken in that could well be where the collision occurred. Again, we have people on the way to the scene, and we're relying primarily on wire reports, which are very cryptic, and on what you can deduce simply by looking at the pictures. But again, if you're just joining us, reports are that a plane, a twin-engine plane, crashed into the World Trade Tower, the North Tower. Fire at the moment appears to be spreading through looks to be about the top 20% of the building involved. Not all of it, but part of the top 20% of this building are clearly involved in flame. And Alina Cho has just joined us. Alina, do you have anything to add?
Well, just that we're getting several conflicting reports, Mark, as you continue to look at this picture. I have been listening to our NBC affiliate, WNBC Channel 4. They've had several witnesses on the phone. One witness, a woman, was just talking and said that she was on the ground, obviously, and had noticed, along with several others, the sound of a plane flying very low. They noticed it because they saw it flying very low. It looked like it was heading straight for the World Trade Center. They heard a big boom, obviously, and shattered glass came raining down onto them. There is another report that we're getting in here from another broadcast network saying that it was a commercial jet. It is obviously very difficult to tell from looking at that picture because I suppose it depends on, well, there are
It appears to be the main trauma to the building appears to be there on the north wall.
We're looking at
and
it
that's
right
a
there.
fairly big hole. But of course, you don't know. You don't know how that kind of damage can be caused. You know, we're not experts on collision damage, but it's a pretty big hole.
We're also getting a report just in from our internal NBC file that says that possibly a commercial jet, again, a big question mark there, a 737. Here's according to an eyewitness, it wasn't dropping steadily lower, appeared not as if plane was in trouble. No nose down. I'm reading directly from this, so it's obviously just some thoughts.
Again, speculation, but another thing that strikes me as I look at these pictures is, if indeed the plane entered the building from the right side of, as you are looking at it now, if it hit the face that is on the right side, right there, where the jagged edge sloping down is, we have flames almost on the other side of the building, which indicates that this was something fairly big, or something that had an awful lot of momentum
to go through it,
to go, you know, deeply into the building. But again,
this one woman who was speaking to WNBC, again our NBC affiliate in New York, was saying that it did not appear to be a big jetliner. She did see the plane, she says. She called it a small jet plane. Obviously not an expert. When prodded by the anchor, she continued to say it did not appear to be a twin-engine plane, something larger than that. Again, whether it was something as large as a 737, we still obviously don't know.
Very difficult to tell. I'll tell you what, our sister station, WNBC, of course, has a great deal of experience covering news events in New York. We're going to go to their coverage for a while.
And, you know, fight it from it. If you're taking a look now, you can see that we've just had another explosion, and that is considerably lower. And is that in the other building? Is that what I'm witnessing?
That apparently does look like it is in the other building at this point.
And that looks to be lower, which means there, you know, obviously there are considerable numbers of stories above that explosion that we just saw. Perhaps we can get another look from one of our sky cams that can take a different angle. Yes, you can tell that it now appears that both buildings are suffering some kind of damage this morning. My colleague Glenn Walker has just joined me here in the studio. And Glenn, I don't know if you've received any other information, but perhaps you can again go over what we do know at this point, which is pretty much visual and what eyewitnesses have told us.
Well, I would hate to speculate, but that looks like a completely separate incident right there. I mean, this building has been the subject of terrorist attacks in the past, and I certainly wouldn't want to speculate at this time, but that is a separate explosion.
Yes, it is.
In the other building. Now, we have tried to get a hold of the Port Authority, which manages the building. We haven't been able to get an answer. We did call MTA, and the MTA says the subway service as of right now is continuing, so that's not a problem because it's obviously very below, but I imagine that will change very quickly after what we just witnessed. That was a dramatic explosion. Again, it was in the separate tower than the one to where the plane just crashed into about a half hour ago.
Yes, and again, there was no sign of any airplane close.
We're interrupting Channel 4. Maria Bartiromo was in the area. You all saw, if you were watching, the second explosion. Maria was in the area and says, in fact, a second airplane hit the other tower, which would indicate that what you have is certainly strong evidence of some kind of suicide attack on the buildings. But Maria Bartiromo was in the neighborhood looking up and says she saw a second plane fly into the side of the second tower. So I'm almost lost for words. I've never seen anything like this, and I've been doing this for many decades. If you were watching, you saw a tremendous second explosion on the South Tower.
And Mark, I want to remind you, this is consistent with what eyewitnesses are telling our NBC affiliate WNBC, which is that the plane was flying very low. They noticed that because of that fact, and that it looked like it was headed straight for the World Trade Center, that it didn't appear as though nothing, that anything was wrong with the plane necessarily, that it was experiencing any trouble, but that it was in fact headed for the World Trade Center.
I know. Who would have thought that there would be two of them?
Right.
And apparently there were two of them, and you can see the enormous amount of damage. You know, that may explain the spread of the damage is not because the planes were big, but they were loaded as bombs.
Loaded, yeah.
Mark, I want to quickly mention, I'm hearing from our producer that the New York Stock Exchange is being evacuated. This might, be some obvious news here. Obviously, the offices in the area, Merrill Lynch.
This is an enormous disaster on Wall Street right now. John Bussey of the Wall Street Journal is in the area. Let's go to John and find out what he knows. John, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mark, I'm here.
What do you know, John?
Mark, I'm on this side of the building that's on the south side. I am looking up at the buildings from just across the street. It is an extraordinary scene. The top several floors, as you can see, are aflame, and smoke is coming up. The second explosion just happened. I did not see what Maria saw because I'm probably on the back side of the building. However, the hole came through the back side. There are gaping holes in the World Trade Center. Papers flying down.
John, let me interrupt you. We have Maria on the phone. Maria, tell us what you saw.
Come here. Yes, hi, Mark. You saw the plane going right into it. I'm standing right on Broadway looking up to both towers. They are on fire at the top of it. I'm seeing what you're seeing, obviously, what is on air. There is debris coming from the building, and I'm not sure what it is, but it's clearly that there was plane that went right into one of the towers, a second plane. I'm here right now with a bystander who actually watched the plane go in. Tell us exactly what you saw.
I just saw out of nowhere the plane came in, crashed right into the Trade Center, and went right through. Just full speed, didn't stop, just right through the whole center, right through the whole building.
And that was the second plane that actually went into the second tower. What I'm looking at right now is the top of the towers on fire, debris falling. The Broadway obviously is filled with watchers. And then when the plane crashed into the second tower, it was a large explosion, a very loud explosion, and everyone really ran for their lives because it was quite loud and quite smoky.
Maria, David Faber wants to ask you a question.
Maria, I'd spoken to somebody in the first tower. It appeared both had been evacuated prior to that second airplane hitting. Is that your understanding?
I'm not sure, David. I know that there was an evacuation call in both towers. I don't know that both buildings were evacuated. I can't confirm that from where I'm standing, which is right on Broadway and Wall Street, watching the towers on fire.
And is that entire area now being cordoned off where you are? I would assume it's filled with emergency
Well, I mean,
vehicles.
there's still a bit of a disarray going on. To be honest, I mean, the fire trucks are coming. People are still standing around. There hasn't been...
Maria, let me bring John Bussey, and John has more to add to this. John, as we watch unbelievable video here. John?
Yeah, Mark, I'm actually right outside of the World Trade Center in a building across the street where the Wall Street Journal's located, and we're looking right down onto the street as the fire engines arrive. These holes in the building are what you expect would happen. I mean, there's furniture that rained down, papers everywhere. Pieces of the building are still smoking, a flame falling from the building onto parking lots nearby. There are cars on fire around the base of the building. It looks like a ticker tape parade went through here, ironically. There's just papers everywhere. I do not see large crowds coming out of the buildings yet. Some of these exits have been blocked off, apparently, at least near the Marriott Hotel, and I could see people leaving over a traverse from the World Trade Center building, but not large crowds out on the street. Partly, Mark, because when this happened, I was outside on the other side of our building. I did not see it other than the effect. Material went blasting out from the buildings at least a block or two. I could hear something come in to the building. It was like a jet engine or an aircraft engine of some sort, it sounded like. And then just a massive explosion and then pieces of the building falling.
All right, John, we have on tape the second attack. These are attacks. I'm going to start calling them attacks. Watch in the upper right-hand portion of your screen. You will see a plane coming in a dive.
Oh, my gosh.
And then hitting the side of the building. Quite obviously a deliberate. These acts are deliberate. We can now rule out any accident.
Mark, these are holes in the side of the building that stretch floors. This is not a B-24, coming in at one or two floors of the building, like happened as you were describing earlier, and demolishing one or two floors. These are several floors that are now aflame, engulfing the entire top of the building. And the emergency services are just now arriving. I mean, they have been here now for several minutes, shortly after the explosion. But clearly, they're just organizing themselves. I think this is going to be a very long day as they try to extinguish these extensive flames that are on either side of the building.
John, I want to bring in at this point the news that obviously an awful lot of our viewers are probably very concerned about people that they know in this area, and they're trying to reach them on the cell phones, and the cell phones in that area are down. So if you have loved ones in the area, they're not going to be able to call you. You're not going to be able to call them. It's just an added, I realize, it just heightens the anxiety, but that's the way it is. So we are told that cell phone service in that area is down. As a side note, really unimportant as far as I'm concerned, but the futures have gone down about 25 points. Obviously, an act like this, and it now appears to be a deliberate terrorist act, will rattle the markets, but this is a short-term thing. Don't concern yourself with the money when you're looking at the damages. Let me recap for you. For those of you who are just joining us, about a half an hour ago, an airplane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. That's the one closest to you in this picture.
Here comes that plane again.
And now you see the second attack. It's dropping down in front. You really kind of lose sight of it once it's about the same color as the buildings. But then about 18 to 20 minutes after the first plane came this second plane, which you just watched. John Bussey mentioned the size of the holes or the depth, and Jerry Clower and I were talking about how far into the building. That's what led me to believe the planes were very large.
Mark, I want to interrupt you for just one moment. I'm just hearing from our producer that the FBI is investigating a possible plane hijacking just before the crash. Nick, are you hearing if that was international? Nothing yet. Okay. The FBI, just want to recap, is investigating a possible plane hijacking just before the crash.
Well, it's hard to believe that there would be two plane hijackings because two planes.
Is this today significant in any religious holiday for any?
I was just thinking, is it a significant anniversary of anything?
Does anyone have that?
Well, let me take a look here.
We'll probably look into that.
Any viewers?
Mark?
Yeah.
We should point out both these towers are homes to a number of Wall Street firms that either have offices there or even their headquarters. I got a call, as I said.
Well, they're also a symbol of American capitalism.
Well, of course. But I think we can hope that the first tower, both towers were evacuated when the first plane hit, so that the second tower, 20 minutes later or so, when that attack occurred, may very well have been empty, we can hope. At that point,
hey,
we're certainly close to.
I just want to interrupt you because we're getting some more information from NBC. This is from a United Airlines employee. He says he's hearing from the United Command Center that an American Airlines plane, a 757 Airbus, was hijacked and crashed purposely into the Trade Center. A second plane was then flown into the second tower. That is what we are hearing from our NBC sources from a worker from United Airlines.
All right, so they were big airplanes.
Mark,
757
John Bussey, yes.
Yeah, Mark, if anybody who's interested in seeing this, I would advise staying far from the building. There's still large pieces of debris, huge chunks of metal falling down, and these pieces of metal are smashing against nearby these fire trucks. So this is kind of a disaster that's still unfolding. Steer clear of the place.
Certainly, yes, and I mean, if you do want to see this, you don't have to get all that close because this is visible for dozens of miles in every direction.
And Mark, as you had predicted, the local television stations, at least one, if not two, maybe all of them have been knocked off the air, at least for a time being. I don't know if they're back on now. I don't believe that they are.
It will be a while. Their main transmitting facilities are in the building with the huge antenna that you're looking at. The main transmitters are on the top floors just underneath the antenna. Some stations have backup facilities on Empire State Building, but in cost-cutting moves, much of them abandoned their Empire State Building facilities. The FBI is investigating reports of plane hijacking before the crashes. It's still not clear. Obviously, a lot of this is still not clear, but we did see for ourselves a plane hit the second tower. So we know that was the cause of the second tower, and we have good reason to believe that a plane hitting the first tower as well. Now, whether someone has hijacked two jetliners or that we don't know, but we definitely saw a plane hit the second tower. Maria Bartiromo, who was the first to report that, is out on the street. Maria, can you add anything more now? All right, she can't hear me right now.
Mark, the cell phone, as you point out, also, I think, connected with that radio tower at the top as well. Yeah. Cell phone, so that's why, in part...
and you know something, David? Even if it were working, it would be so overloaded you wouldn't get through.
Right, good point.
And that is a terrible, terrible addition to the anxiety, because I'm sure that many people watching television right now have loved ones who work in that area, and they don't know where they are, and there's just no way we can help them right now.
President Bush is expected to comment on this very soon. He is in Florida pushing his education plan, but he is just getting word about this from his aides. He will be at a Sarasota event and is expected to talk about this very soon. Obviously, we will go to that when we...
Again, our primary concern here is for human life, but do we know whether any markets operating in that area have decided to suspend trading for today?
The New York Stock Exchange has been evacuated.
All right, the New York Stock Exchange has been evacuated. Yes, there you see it. So,
well, the American is right nearby. I would assume that would be the case.
The stock market official, has the NYSE canceled, or simply we're on hold here? Okay. And the NASDAQ is considering the same thing. And I'm sure the New York Mercantile Exchange is in one of the towers, isn't it? I think it's in one of the towers where they trade oil and things of that nature. Now, obviously, they would be shut down.
A large part of the employees of those buildings, I think, are also civil servants, aren't there? Isn't there a lot of civil service?
Well, I know the governor of New York has an office in one of the towers. I've been there. So, yeah, there is a lot of civil service. There is a lot of Wall Street. There are actual markets. The New York Mercantile Exchange is housed in one of the buildings. It has been evacuated. The New York Stock Exchange has been evacuated. Want to emphasize nothing has happened at these other locations, but they're just being prudent. They're saying, well, we've had two apparent terrorist attacks within an 18-minute period on the World Trade Center, and if you are running an organization that could be a target, obviously you take the safe steps and you say, let's evacuate. But nothing has actually happened at the New York Stock Exchange. They're simply doing the prudent thing. I would imagine America doing the same thing. Yes, John Bussey.
The smoke that you're seeing is partly as a result of the explosion, but now there is a rather ferocious fire that's underway in the building, stretching many floors upward, and it's evidently gaining in intensity. This is from the level of the explosion upward, and of course there are many floors above where this explosion happened, whatever the cause was.
You're referring, John, to the second tower attack? The second tower attack?
This is the first tower.
Okay.
This is the northern more tower of the World Trade Center.
Right.
And you're seeing that smoke begin to intensify.
Yes, we see it.
Partly because on the south side where I am, the south side of the the tower, there's an evidently very intense fire that's underway, and I suspect that's part of the reason why you still see very large chunks of the building raining down. Across, I'd say, a good 10 city blocks, New York City blocks from that North Tower, there's a parking lot which I'm right over. There are cars on fire that evidently got hit by debris, and these cars are just burning untended to the ground. There's one completely engulfed in flames, and mind you, this is quite a distance from this first building, and those fires began right after the first explosion, and then just got exacerbated by the second one a few minutes later.
John, this is Alina Cho. We're just getting this bulletin in that a senior government official speaking on the condition of anonymity said that the agency is pursuing reports that one or both of the planes were hijacked and that the crashes may have been the result of a suicide mission. Of course, you know...
Are they saying
Mark,
that both planes...
One or both planes. One or both planes that moved at 9:19:51 for your own knowledge, Mark, so you can look that up
I see it, yes.
yourself. Associated Press has reported...
We have no word. I believe I saw something earlier that 6 people are confirmed dead.
You know what? That's confusing because, you know, those were the same number of casualties as the 1993 blast. And so I'm not sure, and it was attributed to another...
That's a very good point, yeah.
I'm not sure if that...
I wouldn't imagine at this point
too early. There's no way
that any official fire or any safety official is totting up any casualties right now. Right now, we would be relying only on eyewitness accounts, which aren't always reliable. Well, many people see things that didn't actually happen, but we clearly have a major disaster underway in the financial district of New York, and it has...
And in fact, there is confirmation commodity trading in the New York Board of Trade was shut down, according to traders, so that I'm not sure if we reported that earlier, but that is in fact the case.
Now I'm told that the New York Stock Exchange is at least not officially suspending trading today. We still have 8 minutes to the opening bell, and they have not yet said that they are not going to trade. They haven't said they are going to trade either.
They may well wait just until...
we have...
New York City airports are closed. We're just learning from our NBC internal file, as well as for our New York viewers who are familiar with this, the Lincoln Tunnel is closed as well.
Well, the Lincoln Tunnel was once the target of a terrorist plot, so it would make sense to shut that down. We know that a terrorist organization at one point about 10 years ago was thinking of attacking the Lincoln Tunnel. This obviously is a coordinated...
Mark?
Yes.
Bob Pisani is reporting the New York Stock Exchange is going to delay its opening as of now, and the NASDAQ is scheduled to open at 10 a.m. Eastern Time.
Did the big board say until what hour they're delaying?
No.
Okay.
Just a delayed opening as of now. You know, I know a number of firms in that building. Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the big bond trading firms, is in that building and on a high floor.
I want to remind our viewers as well that President Bush has just learned of this tragedy. He was at an event in Sarasota, Florida. I believe he was reading to children at the time, pushing his education plan. He has now cut short that trip. He canceled his event. He will be making a statement very shortly, and then he will be leaving for Washington. So we are monitoring that as well, and we'll bring that to you as soon as we... All
right, the FBI is making an interesting statement. It says the World Trade Center plane crashes, actually, plural, result of foul play. That is to say, someone did this deliberately, but we have no idea what the motivation was. And I suppose it could be something other than terrorism.
But Mark,
I can't think of what it would be.
Mark, in recent months, different areas of the world have been put on heightened alert due to tangible threats from some of the well-known organizations as well. But at this point, even...
Well, this is...
I think you have to say it's terrorism in light of the fact that there are two. If there were one...
Well, I would say it's the most likely explanation. But then, again, having gone through TWA 800,
Right.
I'm not ready to go up that far. Even when it's obvious, sometimes it doesn't work out that way. I mean, it seemed to me obvious that a 747 doesn't blow up in midair, and yet that one did. So
well, we at least know this, that the FBI...
We know it's deliberate. We know it was caused by airplanes crashing into the buildings.
Right.
Who did it? With whose airplanes? We have a report there may have been some hijackings, but we don't know for sure. All we know is it was a deliberate attack. 2 different airplanes hit 2 different World Trade Center towers, approximately 18 minutes apart. The first one came without warning. After the first one, authorities ordered an evacuation of the second tower, as well as the one that was hit, obviously. But only 18 minutes later, the second plane came in. And not to sound like a worrywart, but it takes more than 18 minutes to evacuate a building of that size. These things are gigantic.
Mark, I'm probably going to...
Bob Pisani is on the phone. Bob?
Good morning, Mark.
I'm sorry, he's where? Oh, he's on the floor of the big board.
Yes, I am. I'm down here at the big board, Mark. I was coming down the West Side Highway when the first explosion occurred, and we looked up, and my driver said, "What is that?" And there was a gigantic fireball, debris raining down, and we got off. The police were not allowing anybody immediately underneath the building, which turned out to be fairly fortunate because, as you noted, 18 minutes later, the second explosion occurred. That's when it got very chaotic. There is a lot of debris on the ground, a lot of ash that's around. I came over here to the building, Mark, and the people here are a bit shell-shocked, but Dick Grasso, the head of the New York Stock Exchange, just got off of the loudspeaker system here saying that the opening would be delayed. We don't know exactly. I've talked to some officials. We do not know exactly when the NYSE will open, but there is going to be a delayed open. They will give a 10-minute notice prior to the opening, Mark.
They're in an interesting position, Bob, a conundrum of sorts. On the one hand, great damage has been done to buildings in which many people who work on Wall Street work, and we have no idea at this stage how many of them may have been hurt or perhaps even lost their lives. On that score, one would think that the New York Stock Exchange would decide not to trade today. On the other hand, on the other part of that equation is the New York Stock Exchange officials may well feel that to not trade today would be to admit that the terrorists, if terrorists they be, have won a round, and perhaps they don't want to do that. So it would not be an easy decision either way. So I suppose the suspension or the postponement is probably the best thing to do at the moment.
That's right, Mark. And I spoke to the head of security here as I was coming in the building and asked him what his plans were. And at that time, this was 15 minutes ago, their plan was to try to keep as many people as possible inside the building, immediately in here, and asking people standing at the door not to go out on the street at this point. So the NYSE is planning a delayed opening at this point, although we don't know exactly when.
All right, both Maria Bartiromo and John Bussey are near phones and have been down in the area and gathering information. So I'm going to go first to Maria and see what she can add, and then we'll go to John, and we'll just do do it that way. Maria?
Thanks, Mark. Well, I was standing outside watching the event, and it truly was like a movie. The plane going right into the second tower. There is debris which is continuing to fall in the area, and basically people are just standing around watching this extraordinary happening.
Maria, the size of the second airplane, we can see it on videotape, but because it's almost the same color as the building, a little difficult to see the size. Did it appear to you to be of a commercial airliner size or smaller?
It looked to be smaller than commercial. I'm not sure I mean, it happened so quickly, so I can't tell you exactly how large it was, but it definitely looked to be smaller than a commercial airliner.
Okay. John Bussey, have you anything to add at this point?
Yeah, Mark, those flames on the North Tower are getting yet more intense. They are about half the building wide where the hole is. I can see them. Presumably, they're also behind the remaining piece of wall in the building.
This is the tower that was hit first, John?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Go ahead.
So those flames are getting more and more intense, so they now have a massive fire on their hands as well. I'm across the street underneath that tower in the World Financial Center, just across West Street, for those who know New York. We're in buildings that Amex, Merrill Lynch, Oppenheimer use as offices and headquarters, and they've been evacuating these buildings as well, though they have been basically undamaged by these explosions. when the explosion happened, I was outside, and the debris moved south. The explosion somehow seemed to blow material southward down the island of Manhattan.
And some of that material, John, I noticed was sort of research and papers from Cantor Fitzgerald coming out of... Now, I know that Cantor Fitzgerald...
Right. John and Maria, I'm going to interrupt you for just a moment. President Bush about to make a statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. I, unfortunately, will be going back to Washington after my remarks. Secretary of Rod Pace and Lieutenant Governor will take the podium and discuss education. I do want to thank the folks here at Booker Elementary School for their hospitality. Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
All right, President Bush stating what he knows. Apparent terrorist attack is what the president said. It's certainly, again, we don't want to say, we don't want to get too far ahead, but we saw the second attack live on television, unfortunately, and apparent terrorist attack certainly seems to be a fair assessment.
Mark, New York television is quoting police who say that the World Trade Center planes were hijacked from Boston. So that is the latest detail that we have. Of course, the president just saying that he's going to hunt down and find those folks who committed those acts that the United States will not tolerate.
All right, let's get back out to the field. I had to interrupt Maria and John Bussey earlier because of the president. And let's return to John Bussey. I believe you were in the middle of telling us something when that happened.
Yes, the buildings across the street from the World Trade Center, which the Wall Street Journal is also housed, has Oppenheimer, American Express, Merrill Lynch, several brokerages use them as offices. These are being evacuated, and they're undamaged from what I can see.
You want me to go outside?
I'm looking up at the building, and there is still debris raining down. There are fire trucks, dozens and dozens, as you would imagine, but the fighters are having a hard time getting into the building, partly because there is so much debris that's coming down. As Maria noted, papers were blasted south out of the building, and I'm now looking out over West Street onto Liberty Street, which is right in front of the second building that was hit, the World Trade Center building that was hit, and it is virtually covered with papers. The parking lot across the street, there are cars on fire, chunks of metal everywhere. It just, it looks like you would imagine. So these fires continue to flame. Apparently, the fighters are just getting up there because these things are basically out of control and getting much, much worse.
Yeah, well, that's right, John, and a good point to make here is that people, of course, are familiar with the movie The Towering Inferno, and certainly in this case, there's no fire apparatus can reach that high. The only way to fight this fire is to go into the building and fight it from within. And you can see just looking at it that must be an extremely perilous undertaking.
Mark, I hate to make reference to another movie at a time like this, but sometimes life does imitate art. When I was standing outside on the other side of the World Financial Center, and this first explosion occurred, I heard what sounded like jet engines coming in low. We're not too far from a National Guard center. Sometimes these planes come down the Hudson and buzz the Statue of Liberty a bit. I thought that's what it was until this massive explosion, which at first sounded like a sonic boom. Then I looked up, and there was debris raining down out of the sky like scenes, unfortunately, from the movie Armageddon, where, asteroids hit New York City and pieces of buildings get blown out. It was in fact, just that dramatic as these chunks of the building fell down onto the street.
Yeah, it is incredibly dramatic. Now, from where you stand, John, and again, I just want to get back to very quickly to my point of the fact that the firemen have to fight these fires from inside the building. I mean, these are incredibly brave men and women who are going to go into that building right now and try and do that. John, as to the second tower, the tower that was hit second, which is my understanding is the South Tower, that does not appear to have broken out into the uncontrolled fire that we've seen elsewhere, or has it? Do you have a vantage point on that at all?
I'm on the southwest corner of that building, across Liberty Street and West Streets, looking up at it, and there's a massive hole out of the south portion of that south building. Then there's smoke also now coming out of the other side of the building, I can see, and flames. And so, yes, it does look like the firefighters are going to have the same trouble with this building, which is smoke, extraordinary damage, followed by what looks now like a fire that they're going to have to contend with many dozens of floors up.
And the second attack, the attack on the South Tower, who knows? The attackers are almost certainly dead. They were in the plane. They were either in command of the plane, or one way or another. They were either flying it or they were holding a gun to someone's head. They're dead. But it appeared the attack on the second tower was aimed quite a bit lower than on the first tower, and would therefore create much more of a zone, because fire naturally tends to travel up.
That's correct, Mark. It is the hole that I see, at least, out of the south side of the building, which I believed was the exiting wound to the building, not the entry point of the building.
If you're looking at the south side, that would be the exit point, yes.
That's right, because I saw, as I was waiting to speak with you, I saw this explosion go out from the south side of the building, so it likely entered the other side.
Right.
It is, as you point out, several floors below the other structural damage to the building, to the north tower. But the flames, so far, while I can see them in the south tower, they're nowhere near as intense and as engulfing as they are in the north tower.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at on TV, and I just want to make sure that we are only seeing roughly half of the surface of each building as we look from one direction. But the South Tower, so far, does not appear to have broken out in the kind of raging fire in the North Tower. And again, at times like these, I just marvel at firefighters who are actually going to go up there. They're climbing right now and risking their lives to fight this thing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alina.
Quickly, I want to add here that we're just getting from Dow Jones, which is consistent with our earlier reports from NBC and other sources, that it was an American Airlines 767 from Boston involved in the World Trade Center crash.
That's a very large airplane.
I'm assuming that's the first. We're talking about the first crash there. And that is consistent with earlier reports. Again, Dow Jones is reporting that an American Airlines 767 from Boston was involved in the crash.
Okay, we're going to go back to WNBC Channel 4, which is working the scene on the street below. Let's join their coverage for a moment.
It's nothing like I've ever seen. Nothing like anybody here in New York has ever seen either. That's the scene here from Prince and Worcester Street, and we'll talk to some other people as time goes on.
Joe, you are not close enough to... Okay, apparently Joe cannot hear us, so thank you, Joe. We appreciate that. Obviously, we are, again, trying to ferret out all the information we can about exactly what happened in Lower Manhattan this morning. The president has said it was a terrorist attack. There were 2 airplanes involved. Dozens of eyewitnesses have told us that. One of them appeared to be bigger than the other. The second bigger than the other.
And we all witnessed it right here on live television. Caught us all completely off guard. And a normal work day here in Manhattan has come to a standstill. We've been told that the subway lines 1, 2, 3, and 9 have been shut down. All the Hudson River crossings have been shut down. The New York Stock Exchange has closed down for the day. And right now, a lot of people are just stunned in shock. Again, 2 airplanes, 2 separate incidents, minutes apart, crashing into both towers of the World Trade Center. And you certainly see the result as far as the structural damage. I mean, it is major. And as you said, President Bush said that this is an apparent terrorist attack. We expect to hear from Mayor Giuliani in just a couple of minutes. Governor Pataki is in town. As a matter of fact, he does have an office in the World Trade Center, but President Bush says that he has talked to the governor.
Right.
So as far as we know, the governor is okay. And like I said, we should hear from Mayor Giuliani in the next couple of minutes.
But again, to reiterate, we know nothing about what happened to the people who work on those in those floors, in those buildings. So we are simply waiting to find out about injuries and casualties, if indeed that's what happened. So you were looking at a scene that one would wish you could never witness in a city like this.
Of course, this is the second major attack on the World Trade Center. There was the bombing back in 1993. And, of course, that was at the bottom. And the top of the building, obviously very vulnerable, and we certainly witnessed that today.
Right, with all the security changes that they've made on the bottom, so nobody can get up there without the right kind of clearance. But it's vulnerable to attack by air.
Absolutely, you can't stop it up there.
We are going to once again go to Katie McGee because, as we've been telling you, the city is literally at a standstill. No one's being allowed in from any of the river crossings. And the subway lines have been shut down in that area, and the airports are all closed. Katie, what more can you tell us?
Jane, this is the latest. The city at this point is at a standstill. All three major area airports, LaGuardia, Kennedy, and Newark, are closed at this point to all incoming and outgoing traffic. All bridges and tunnels. No one is letting any traffic head into town. At this point, outbound, you are going to find some people. We just saw some folks that had been sitting in one of the tubes coming out of the Lincoln Tunnel. They were allowed out, but now everybody being turned away. We also saw a backup down near Canal Street waiting to get into the outbound Holland. Those people also being turned away. At this point, again, no one being allowed to head into the city. For all intents and purpose, all train service suspended is what we're hearing at this point. Police are saying, please leave the city if you can. Of course, this is rough because of the way traffic is right now. You really, really want to steer clear of anywhere south of Midtown. And again, everyone right now being turned away. We saw traffic trying to get into the Lincoln Tunnel, actually turning around and backing up buses, New Jersey Transit buses, bringing people back into New Jersey, never even making it close to the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel.
Katie, what do you think right now would probably be the best way to get out of Manhattan? Probably head up the FDR and the West Side Highway?
At this point, you're going to want to try and get as north as possible. I can see from one of my cameras live right now the westbound Cross Bronx heading in towards the outbound George Washington Bridge. Traffic is in an absolute crawl right now, but they are letting you get onto the bridge and, from what it looks like, come in over it and back into New Jersey. I do see traffic coming outbound George Washington Bridge, inbound again, completely stopped. If you were planning on heading into the city, even if you think you may still have a meeting, at this point, again, you're being advised to please stay where you are.
For example, if you lived in New Jersey, your best bet probably would be go through Westchester County, cross the Tappan Zee Bridge, and come back down?
You may want to try that out. Let me take a look right now and see how my Tappan Zee Bridge camera looks. Just bear with me for 1 second, and I'll tell you. Actually, it looks like right now, traffic heading into Westchester is moving, but it's at a crawl. Again, at this point, things are happening so rapidly. If you were to leave home in Westchester right now, I can't tell you you'd definitely be able to get into town in another half an hour, 40 minutes or so.
Well.
All right, we are back with CNBC programming. What you have been watching is WNBC programming. Nick, what was that last message you gave me?
There's a fire at the Pentagon.
There are now reports of a fire at the Pentagon. This is the Pentagon.
Oh my goodness.
You are looking at the Pentagon. The United States has been attacked. Forces unknown.
And look at the fire at the bottom.
The White House is ordering an immediate evacuation of the White House.
Mark, the AP, Alina, is reporting an aircraft has crashed into the Pentagon. Witnesses say, being cited by the Associated Press, an aircraft has crashed into the Pentagon. That on the AP, according to witnesses.
According to NBC's Jim Miklashevsky, he is reporting a bomb detonated at the heliport at the Pentagon. Not sure if this is separate from that or in addition.
Must be in addition to, because this is the building involved right here. Someone, and frankly, I'm surprised that they got through to the Pentagon, because that's an area where if a plane starts to approach, they can shoot them down. New York is a different area. New York is vulnerable to this kind of thing because, there's traffic all the time and there's nothing you can do. This, however, the Pentagon and, of course, nearby the White House are no-fly zones, and but somehow someone has managed to do a great deal of damage to the Pentagon, which is the world's largest office building, and obviously the seat of the military power of the United States. And on the left, you are looking at the seat of the economic power of the United States. So some group unknown, and Lena, I think some Palestinian group.
Well, here's what, again, these are preliminary reports. A Palestinian group has claimed responsibility for the New York World Trade Center plane attacks. Abu Dhabi Television reported it received a call from the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, claiming responsibility for crashing 2 planes into the buildings.
Meaning no disrespect to the Palestinians, but I don't think they have the.
The wire's also reporting that the White House is now being evacuated.
Yes, I was just the West Wing.
I would imagine every major anything that could be considered an attack. This is a guard outside the White House who, if you're near the White House, don't go near it, because they're in emergency mode now, and they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. In New York, you have an attack on the World Trade Center. 2 planes deliberately crashed in, one about 18 minutes apart. The first one crashed into the tower that you're looking at on the right. The second one, which we actually had videotape of, the second attack came 18 minutes later on the tower on the left. Where the Pentagon attack fits in the timetable, we're not sure, but it appears to have followed the World Trade Center attack, but maybe not by more than 15 minutes. And then you have the Pentagon situation. Now,
and now this,
Mark. Just a minute, Alina.
Okay.
And please be aware, the city of New York is virtually shut down. You cannot get into the city of New York right now from the New Jersey side. The tunnels and the bridge are closed because they could be targets of an attack as well. Alina, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. We're just getting this in. This seems to be a separate incident. Smoke is seen rising from the center of Washington, according to television reports. So that could be in addition to what is going on at the Pentagon. Of course, we want to remind you that the West Wing of the White House and now the Capitol building have both been evacuated because of all of this that has been happening over, obviously, concerns over terrorist threats.
Again, it's virtually unbelievable. I mean, it's like something out of a movie. Who would ever have thought that?
Mark, this is John Buss.
Yeah, John. Yeah, go ahead.
Mark, this is the most horrific scene I've ever seen. Bodies have begun falling from the building.
Oh, my God.
There is such intense smoke. I've seen a half a dozen from where I'm standing, which is in the World Financial Center. People either are falling or they are leaping to escape this smoke. It is as horrific as you would imagine. The people are dropping. One is falling this very instant. Arms are splayed, and they're crashing to the ground on top of the glass canopy, the plexiglass canopy outside of the building and onto the street. There are fire trucks all around. The firefighters are either inside the building or standing back from it because of the debris. And now, this just began about 4 minutes ago. People having to jump, apparently, to escape the flames. I thought at first it was debris, but now looking at one after another, probably I've seen 8 or 9 of these individuals have to leap to escape the flames and this intense smoke, falling what must be something on the order of 75, 85 floors to the street below.
John, this is coming from the North Tower?
This is coming from the North Tower. These are people who I see jumping out onto the west, what it would be the West Side Highway, passing in front of the building. And as you can imagine, Mark, it is a gruesome scene. It's just blood or red from, I can't confirm that is absolutely bodies, but I can see it sure looks that way.
All right.
And then red splotches on the street in front of the building.
Okay.
Mark, a couple of things I want to pass along very quickly. According to the Associated Press, the White House has been threatened with a terrorist attack, according to a source. The West Wing has been evacuated. We want to mention now the Capitol has been evacuated as well the U.S. Treasury. And also, on another front, I want to mention that this Palestinian group has denied responsibility for
the Palestinians don't have this kind of muscle. All aircraft flights in the United States have now been canceled. Every aircraft in the air has been ordered to land at the nearest airport immediately. This is obviously a step to clear the air of all innocent aircraft. Whether there remain any guilty aircraft is debatable, but at least what the government is trying to do is clear the air, and obviously, well, not obviously, but it looks like what they will do is they will then put up military planes, and anyone still in the air is going to get shot down. But all aircraft flights in the United States have been canceled. All planes currently in the air have been ordered to land at the nearest available airport. I don't know how they will handle flights coming from overseas. They will probably be told to land as they cross our border. You are looking now, if you're just joining us, you are looking at the World Trade Center on the left. The North Tower is the one on your right. South Tower is the tower on your left. Earlier this morning, they were the target of an apparent terrorist attack with an airplane, a substantial airplane, perhaps even an American Airlines jetliner hijacked out of Boston. That's a perhaps. Crashed into that tower at, shortly after 9 o'clock. And then 18 minutes later, a plane into the South Tower, and then the Pentagon. Let's join MSNBC and see what they have on this story so far.
Be dealt with. Probably this will be a greater challenge to our intelligence and our ability to be diplomatic and intelligent about negotiation than it is a challenge to our strength as a military power.
The FAA is telling us that the planes that are already in the air will continue to their destinations, but all other planes in airspace above the United States have been grounded. Governor Cuomo, I understand that your successor, George Pataki, is in New York City right now. There are a number of state offices, aren't there, Governor, in the Twin Towers?
My office, and I think the governor moved his office out of the World Trade Center, Governor Pataki, but my office was there, and I think there are still some other offices there, but not as many as there were when I was governor.
Air Force One is now leaving Sarasota, Florida, on its way back to Washington, D.C., but let me just read directly the bulletin from Associated Press. The White House was evacuated today after the Secret Service received credible threat of a terrorist act against the presidential mansion and residence. It has been evacuated. The Pentagon struck, apparently according to one eyewitness, a reporter, by a plane. A large plane is now burning. It has been evacuated. 2 planes deliberately struck, it appears, the World Trade Center, which still burns at this hour. New York City has essentially been shut down. The Lincoln Tunnel is closed. All New York airports are closed. And now, of course, all plane flight in the United States has been stopped. Those in the air will continue to their destinations.
We continue on the phone with former New York Governor Mario Cuomo, who was governor at the time of the previous attack on the World Trade Center, the bombing back in 1993. If you can hold on for just 1 second, we want to listen in, Governor, to Jim Miklaszewski, who is reporting from the area of the Pentagon. The Pentagon, again, has been evacuated.
The second floor buckled upward, and then the third floor above him actually collapsed downward. The scene on the other side of the building, as it's being described to us, there are people being removed on stretchers. Security forces are evacuating the building right now, and according to the officials here at the Pentagon, they still don't know exactly what it was, but as you reported, Katie, eyewitnesses reported that in fact it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon.
And Mick, any idea, I wasn't quite sure if you said this, about the number of people who might have been hurt or worse in this?
No idea at all, Katie. As you know, having worked here on any given day, this is a small city, 25 to 30,000 people may be working here at any one time. That portion of the Pentagon, by the way, had just been remodeled and just reopened. If the crash had occurred just a few months ago, that section of the Pentagon would have been virtually empty. But at this time of day, early morning or mid-morning, the Pentagon's very busy. It's impossible to say how many casualties there may be. But there have been a large number of people cited being removed on stretchers. And again, as one survivor said, the floor just buckled up under him and the roof caved in on him.
All right, Mick, thank you very much. We want to move a couple of miles away from you right now to the White House, where Bob Kerr is standing by. And, Bob, we understand that building has now been evacuated. Let me just read, while we're listening to Jim Miklashevsky, another eyewitness, Paul Begala, Democratic consultant, was near the Pentagon, and he said this, is to quote, it was a huge fireball, a huge orange fireball at the Pentagon. Another witness told him a helicopter has exploded, but the best information we're getting is from an Associated reporter who said, quote, I saw the tail of a large airliner. It plowed right into the Pentagon. There is billowing black smoke. And, of course, there you see it on the television screen. Meantime, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center continue to burn at this hour. Ambulances dispatched to the scene, firefighters, people are being treated in nearby hospitals. Let's look again at the videotape. As we were watching the first tower burn, here is the second plane. And there is the explosion into the second tower of the World Trade Center. A horrible scene of devastation and fire. Eyewitnesses on the ground, and it was rush hour, describing pandemonium, panic, people unwilling to go out into the streets because so much debris and fire showering down on the streets below.
Governor Mario Cuomo, do you remain on the phone with us? We no longer have Governor Mario Cuomo on the phone, but we do have Ashley Banfield, of course, here at MSNBC and anchor here. Ashley, are you still in Manhattan?
I'm in Manhattan, Chris, and I'm just walking southward towards the World Trade Center. It's just an incredible sight. The streets of Manhattan are chock full of people who are stopped exactly where they were in the middle of their commute, standing, gaping, and looking at this sight. It is unbelievable. Emergency vehicles all throughout Manhattan, not only Midtown, but down near Chelsea now, where I am, have been streaming by us at every couple of seconds and intervals. Ambulances are heading by me now. A lot of the vehicles are also unmarked, looking like FBI vehicles heading towards the World Trade Center as well. Not only that, but we stopped by one of the hospitals, St. Vincent, which has been cordoned off. I can only guess possibly waiting for victims to be brought northward up 7th Avenue. The traffic has also all been stopped, heading south down 7th Avenue. I haven't had a chance to see any of the other north-south thoroughfares, but I'm assuming that they are also tracked. We were down in the subway trying to at least take the subway to get downtown to the Wall Street area and World Trade Center area. And the subway announcer came over the loudspeaker saying, due to a police investigation, that subway traffic will be stopped between a certain area, so most of the people in the subway weren't able to get downtown either. It's really quite bizarre. Passing through Times Square, hundreds of people are gathered, staring up at the television screens in Times Square and listening to what's going on and listening to the coverage, watching the pictures. A woman walked by me just a few
Ashley,
seconds
can you
ago
hold
crying.
on 1 second? We'll let you catch your breath. We want to go to Walter Perez of WNBC.
First, Marna Ringel. And Marna, you work across the street. Tell me exactly what you saw on the street, and as you looked up, what you saw, because you said you saw the second one. Am I correct?
No, I didn't see the second one. I actually was coming out of the building, and there was maybe about 30 or 40 people at the bottom of One World Financial covered in blood. I did not expect that at all. And I work for Lehman in One right here. And a gentleman that I work with was on the telephone. He said, "What was that?" I said, he thought it was thunder. I looked over, screamed, "It's a bomb," because I saw a piece of the building flow down. And I think I scared my entire floor because I can scream pretty loud, and it was pretty bad.
Now, you mentioned that you saw people on the road outside of the building. Explain that scene.
I saw there's maybe about 30 or 40 people. There's actually, oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
We're not sure exactly what happened, but it was another explosion on the far side of one of the buildings from where we're standing. The reverberation and another explosion on the right-hand side. Another building has gone up on the right-hand side of the road. People are now running down the street. We're not sure if that was another explosion or if that was advanced debris. Joining me also is Jim Plant. Jim, you're also a witness of what happened. Tell me exactly what you saw from your vantage point across the street.
I was just across Liberty and West here, and I saw the second plane hit the Tower 2. It looked like a 737. It hit a glancing blow. It didn't hit it direct. I don't know where the rest of the plane went, but it went in, fireball came out, and it hit lower than the first plane, which hit the upper floors.
Jim, thank you very much. At this point, as you can tell,
it does appear that there has been a third explosion in the area of the World Trade Center. There was first one plane that hit one of the Twin Towers, a second plane, each about 1 hour ago, and now a third explosion. Ashley Banfield is in Manhattan. Ashley, did you see or hear anything just moments ago?
Oh my God, Chris, this is incredible. I'm looking right at it.
What are you seeing, Ashley?
Well, I saw the explosion for one.
Could you feel it?
Everybody, I can smell it. Everyone around screamed at the time that it happened. It's just unbelievable. I can't see that it's another building. It looks almost in the same position as the second bomb or the second explosion. But it's unbelievable.
What's the scene around you?
What the people on the scene don't seem to realize is that one of the Twin Towers has collapsed. One of the two towers is gone. The people on the scene are so engulfed in the smoke, it's understandable, and they're not looking at the larger scene that we are, but one of the World Trade Center towers, unless
no, that's being confirmed on the wires right now.
The south building has completely collapsed. Now, we heard from them just moments before that another jetliner, a 737, crashed into the building way down low, and that was apparently enough to take the World Trade Center South Tower out completely. The building is gone. The scope of this attack is mind-boggling. You are looking at Lower Manhattan. The entire Lower Manhattan is covered with smoke and debris. You're looking at an area of square miles that is completely obscured.
The exchange will not open today.
No, they cannot do it now. They cannot do anything now. And another very worrisome thing is that we don't know that this is over.
That's correct.
And this latest plane came almost an hour after the first. I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
It's considering the damage that could be done by one of the World Trade Center buildings collapsing in that area. Just to go over, that area is obviously very crowded. The World Financial Center is right next door. That is where John Bussey has been speaking to us from. The offices of Dow Jones, Merrill Lynch headquarters down there as well. You could just imagine the damage that would be done by one of those towers falling. It's hard to imagine just how much.
The collateral damage is incredible.
And that is the center, to a certain extent, of the financial world, of course, in many of the buildings surrounding the World Trade Center.
This is a catastrophe of enormous proportions, David, not only in terms of what is happening to the people on the ground, but I think it is safe to assume at this point that all of the airplanes used in this attack had innocent passengers on board.
And we're talking about a 767, which, for example, can hold a maximum of 300 people. And we are now talking about 4 separate attacks.
We're talking about
one at the Pentagon, 3 now at the World Trade Center, the last of which has leveled the South Tower, Mark?
The South Tower has disappeared. It collapsed, apparently, when a third airplane hit very close to the base. This is certainly, it's almost certainly a terrorist attack, and if it is ultimately confirmed to be a terrorist attack, this is the worst terrorist attack in history, anywhere.
Mark, it's hard to imagine the damage that could have been done to that part of Manhattan, and it's got to be beyond the control, certainly, of the emergency services and everyone else in the city of New York's ability to well,
I don't know anyone who could handle this, David. I mean,
we must be looking at Washington right now.
Now we are looking at the Pentagon. Yeah, that's the Pentagon. I recognize the facade of the building. That was the subject of only one plane so far, but again, in New York, the third attack came about 45 minutes after the first, so there is no way to know at this point what the final extent of this is going to be, but you are looking at Lower Manhattan, and it is completely obscured.
And consider the panic with the people who are coming out of buildings unable to see what's going on, where they're going in that right now.
American Airlines has just confirmed that it was Flight 11 from Logan Airport to LAX, which was involved in one of the 3 World Trade Center attacks. I believe this is a 767, which has a maximum capacity of 300 passengers and crew, I believe. Just to give you, can we go to a shot of the Pentagon quickly? Because just to give you an idea of the sheer terror of what is involved here, one Associated Press radio reporter is quoted as saying, I saw the tail of a large airliner. It plowed right into the Pentagon. There is billowing black smoke, as, of course, we continue to look at the devastation at the World Trade Center.
All right, Howard Shapiro of Goldman Sachs, which is at 1 New York Plaza in the heart of this situation, is on the phone. Howard? Howard?
Yes.
Can you tell us what...
Hold on 1 second. I can't hear you. 1 second. Okay, hello?
They're closing your building, obviously. What can you see? What do you know?
Okay, I'm at 1 New York.
The police department recommends you evacuate via SDR Drive. The building...
1 second, I'm sorry.
Let's go back.
Evacuate by SDR Drive. I repeat, the building is officially closed. Please evacuate on the South Street side.
All right, you got to get out of there, Howard.
I'm sorry. I'm going to give you 1 minute here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm on 1 New York Plaza on the 46th floor, so we're about 5 to 7 blocks from the World Trade Center with obviously a bird's eye view of the buildings. We heard a large explosion for the first attack, and we all ran to the window, and we thought a boiler had exploded. We weren't certain what was happening, and then a few minutes later, I saw a large commercial airline plow into the second building, very clearly veering in towards the building. And then now 5 minutes ago or so, or 3 minutes ago, the building imploded. All there is a large plume of smoke all over Lower Manhattan up to the 46th floor. I literally see papers from people's offices from the World Trade Center floating in the sky past me, past the window.
Howard, thank you very much, and I think you better get out of the building.
I'm on my way. Bye.
Thank you very much. Howard Shapiro, Goldman Sachs.
Mark, the Sears
our need for information is not more important than his need to get to safety.
The Sears Tower in Chicago has been evacuated as well. The White House, the Capitol, the U.S. Treasury.
Well, once again, for those joining late, the government has ordered all airliners currently flying over the United States to land. There's some confusion. I have a report from one of the wire services. I believe it's Reuters. I don't know who this is. The FAA is ordering all planes to land. Whether they're ordered to proceed to their destination or land at the closest airspace is debatable. It would seem to me under these circumstances you would tell them to land soon. You wouldn't tell a cross-country flight to keep going because you don't know that they're not in hostile hands. Obviously, if the skies can be cleared of all commercial and civilian aircraft, then anyone else left up there is hostile. And I'm sure that's what the government has in mind, to get the skies cleared so that military jets, if this is a continuing attack, it may sound like closing the barn door after the horse is gone, but this has been going on for quite some time. So the prudent thing to do, obviously, is to assume that there could be more and to not relax vigilance until you know there won't be more. And so the government is clearing the skies over the entire United States to make sure that that any planes left up there are obviously have ill intent. One of the great difficulties here is that the terrorists, if terrorists they be, are using commercial airliners, presumably loaded with passengers. A despicable, heinous, you pick the word.
Mark, the best coordinated previous attack against the United States was nearly, was, I believe, in 1998, though we're going to have to check on that. You'll remember the 2 embassies in Kenya and Tanzania were attacked. 220 some people were killed, including 12 Americans. Early indications, according to U.S. officials who tell NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell, is that Osama bin Laden is being indicated because this note says he was the only terror leader with the capability of coordinating such an attack.
This took enormous coordination. This took a lot of money. This took a lot of complete disregard for human life. This took insanity. You are looking at a dramatically changed skyline.
Mark, do we know how the second tower, was there another plane?
There was a third plane in New York. Plane number 1 hit the North Tower, which you're looking at now.
Right, we saw number 2.
Plane number 2 we saw hit the South Tower. Plane number 3 hit the Pentagon. Then plane number 4 hit the base of the South Tower, and
is there footage?
And it collapsed.
All in a matter of an hour.
Is there footage of the fourth one?
I have not seen any, okay. but eyewitnesses said it was a 737
that went into the
the base of the not the one we saw. The third plane to hit New York was a 737, which went into the base of the World Trade Center South Tower. You now see only one tower, the South Tower, completely collapsed. That's a 102-story building reduced to rubble.
And Mark, there were a lot of emergency personnel already on the scene. There were emergency
personnel on the scene, in the streets below.
In the building.
There were firemen in the building. There were spectators who are drawn to that kind of thing. And that much of a building falling, David, as you mentioned, would cover an enormous area. It's going to affect blocks around. And
David, do we know who was in that South Tower? I know that Cantor's in the north.
Yeah, they were in that tower we're still looking at burning. There's any number of firms in the South Tower. I don't know any offhand, Jerry, by name. But the fact is that with the tower of one of the World Trade Centers collapsing, you can only imagine the damage that's been done to any of the surrounding buildings, which are home to all sorts of different enterprises and thousands upon thousands upon thousands of employees and people.
And people, yeah. People who lived in the area of shopkeepers, people who operated small businesses. It's a staggering sight what we're looking at now.
Mark, I want to remind you that the Wire is saying that the South Tower there collapsed following this morning's plane crash. There is not yet confirmation of a fourth plane. We want to remind you the first plane hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, which you see there still standing. Second plane hit the South Tower, which later collapsed. We're not sure if another plane was involved. A third plane hit the Pentagon.
No, at the time, we had MSNBC's feed up.
Right.
And we could clearly hear people saying in the background, "My God, another plane."
Really? Okay.
And then the South Tower disappeared. So while officials may not have confirmed it, it seems fairly clear. Plus, the tower would not have collapsed absent some tremendous trauma.
Absolutely, and that seems to make sense, and that was my next question. Second explosion at Pentagon building reported, according to Dow Jones. That is literally just crossing the wires now.
A second explosion at the Pentagon.
A second explosion
Could we
at
get
the
up
Pentagon,
the Pentagon shot?
Is reported at the Pentagon. That is Dow Jones and Sky News.
We're working on bringing up the Pentagon shot right now. The smoke beginning to clear a little. Maria Bartiromo, what can you tell us?
Thanks, Mark. You know, now I'm standing on the floor of the exchange, but I just came back from outside, and I am covered with soot. Basically, I was outside when that third explosion occurred, and everyone ran for their lives, basically. I went under a building. There was a little stairwell that I could go under with about 20 people, and we just stayed there. The whole area turned pitch black when that third explosion happened. At this point, people are in the New York Stock Exchange. People feel that this is the safest place to be right now, because when everyone was outside, there was 3 explosions. So now the exchange is keeping everyone inside. I'm on the floor with about, I don't know, 100, 200 people right here, and we're just waiting. That's all I can tell you. It's pitch black outside. There's soot falling from the sky. I don't know if you could see my jacket and my shoes, but I'm completely covered in white smoke from the explosion, from that third explosion.
Maria, do you know what that explosion was?
That was about I'd say 15 minutes ago.
But do you know what caused it?
No, I don't.
At the moment, Maria, and for the benefit of the people with you, at the moment there were eyewitnesses who feel that another plane,
yes,
a third plane,
that's what some people are saying. Now,
hit the base of the South Tower.
I was under the impression that it was just the actual collapse of the building, but some people are speculating that. I mean, I didn't want to say that because...
No, we had, at the moment it happened, we had MSNBC speed up, and we could hear people shouting, a third plane, and then there was an explosion, another plane, and then there was an explosion.
That's right. And I was outside during that explosion. Immediately, we all ran. I was running backwards to see if I could see anything. We all went under. There was a little stairwell to go under a building. About 20 of us went under there, and we were just waiting. And for about 10 minutes, it was pitch black outside. All we could see was smoke. It was in our faces. We were all coughing because there's just such soot and smoke everywhere.
All right, Maria Bartiromo, stay where you are, if you will. And AP says 2 planes what? 2 planes total? All right, so AP is saying there was no third plane to hit the South Tower. Is that right? Okay, well, that's a possibility. We had no official confirmation. We did have people we heard
something
in the
ignited there, though. Maybe they had that was an incredible.
That was an incredible explosion.
And that does not cause from a.
I agree with you. I think it was the third plane, but again,
no, it could have been something. It could have been something that was planted.
Or a bomb planted in the building. Yeah. Let's bring ourselves up to date on the situation in Washington, where the damage is so far less considerable, but nonetheless significant. Hampton.
Well, Mark, the big story of this unfolding story here in Washington is, number one, an explosion, sources saying a plane hitting a portion of the Pentagon. As you mentioned earlier, it is the world's largest office building. On any given day, at least 30,000 people work inside that 5-sided structure. Also here in Washington, the White House, the Capitol, the Treasury Department, and all of the national monuments, in fact, have been evacuated. The FAA has basically ordered all air traffic nationwide shut down. The president is en route back to Washington, D.C. from Florida. You heard his earlier comments. Also, we have just gotten word, too, that over at the IMF and World Bank buildings here in Washington, D.C., people there have been told they can leave the buildings, but they are not required to leave.
Hampton?
Yes.
Hampton Pearson,
you're looking at pictures right now taped earlier from the scene outside the Pentagon.
Outside the Pentagon.
That's what you're looking at right now.
We had one report, and all of us need to understand, including the viewers, that in a situation like this, you will get reports that later turn out to not be true. There's a lot of confusion. But we had a report a few minutes ago, Hampton, of a second explosion at the Pentagon. Have you heard anything of that nature?
Well, I am aware of the Dow Jones report. We've been scrambling to try and get additional information as well. But at this time, we cannot independently confirm that recent report of a second explosion at the Pentagon.
Right,
but these are earlier pictures you can see. This, by the way, is a portion of the Pentagon that had basically been reopened. There's been a major renovation underway for the last several years. Ironically, had this incident happened even as recently as 2 weeks ago, that portion of the building where there was an explosion inside the Pentagon basically would have had very few civilian or military personnel at their desk and on duty today.
Well, that's a welcome piece of relatively good news given what's going on. All
Mark,
right.
we're just getting
Hampton,
this.
thank you very much. Stand by there, please.
We're just getting this report in from Reuters that German air traffic authorities say all European flights to the United States have been suspended. All European flights to the United States have been suspended. Also, for some of our West Coast viewers who are just tuning in at this time, we want to remind you that that at least one of the planes, if not all of them, were hijacked. One of them is American Airlines Flight 11 from Logan, Boston Airport to Los Angeles Airport. It was scheduled to arrive from Boston into Los Angeles at 10:37 a.m. Pacific time, which would be a little more than 3 hours from now. Again, we want to remind you as you look at this shot that we have confirmation of at least 2 planes hitting the World Trade Centers, one of them leveling the South Tower.
The South Tower is no longer there.
We have a report of a plane hitting the Pentagon and an unconfirmed report, at least from NBC, but a report from Dow Jones of a second explosion at the Pentagon as you look at live pictures there.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a step back here now. There's a moment of non-action, at least from the media point of view. Obviously, rescue people are involved in a frantic effort right now to save lives, and our prayers are with them. To go back to the beginning, it was at approximately 9 o'clock or a few minutes thereafter that a plane slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York. 18 minutes later, and this is why, you can't assume that it's over. 18 minutes later, a second plane, which we could clearly see, slammed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Here you see the second plane. It is clearly a jetliner. And it came in from, it came in from the south. It came in from the south. And I misunderstood. There you see it in the upper right. This is the same shot. It comes in from the south. It disappears behind the buildings. So what you are looking at in front here is the exit wound, so to speak, of the explosion. And here, this, 20 minutes thereafter, something happened to the South Tower. There were some eyewitnesses. We heard in the background screaming that another plane. But here you see an enormous explosion about midway up in the South Tower, and the entire structure collapses. It just disappears.
Mark, this may not be a surprise to you, but we're just learning from NBC that 30 Rockefeller Plaza, the GE building, the parent of NBC, the home to many NBC offices, is also being evacuated as a precautionary measure. Okay. I wanted to pass that along very quickly.
Now that's interesting from a forensic point of view. The explosion that leveled the South Tower came, it seemed, roughly halfway up, and yet it took the entire tower out. And again, some reports, eyewitness reports, not yet corroborated by any official, were that yet a third plane hit that tower. Then, before the third plane took out the South Tower, a plane hit the Pentagon. And there are reports, as Lena said, of a second plane hitting the Pentagon.
Second explosion.
A second explosion, I beg your pardon. A second explosion at the Pentagon. The FAA has ordered all flights in the United States grounded. The Europeans have grounded all flights to the United States. The planes that have been used in this attack were apparently hijacked civilian jetliners with passengers on board.
At least one of them. At
least one. And so the FAA is trying to clear the skies over the United States of all aircraft. And if anybody doesn't land, then you've got possibility that it's in hostile hands. Again, we're not trying to sensationalize this and say there are more attacks to come. It's just that this went on. There was about an hour between the first attack and the second attack, so no one is ready to say, well, there are no more attacks coming. You just don't know. Now, to the markets, the effect on the markets, because we are, after all, a financial station, and we don't in any way mean to downplay the human aspect of this. Our first and foremost concern is for all of the people.
Mark, very quickly, we're just getting word from the Associated Press that a car bomb has exploded outside the State Department. That is according to senior law enforcement officials. I'm sure that we have a crew on the way there, but that is just in from the Associated Press. A car bomb has exploded outside the State Department in Washington.
All right, there again, yet more evidence that it's not sensationalism here to say that the danger is not yet over. We don't know how many more attacks are planned, and the danger is not going to be over until some governmental authority says it is. At least that's the prudent thing to do, is to assume it's not over. Now, the impact on New York City has been that the city is virtually closed. You cannot get into or out of New York City. Period. Don't try. The impact on the markets has been, so far, I don't believe the New York Stock Exchange has said anything. Although they have not yet opened, they have evacuated their building. I would consider it very unlikely that they will trade. The New York Mercantile Exchange was housed in one of the Twin Towers. It obviously is not going to open. The bond market, of course, is an electronic situation. There is no floor to speak of, at least for corporate bonds. And the floors to trade the futures are in Chicago. Don't know the impact there.
Don't know if they've closed.
Oh, the Mercantile across the street. Okay. Marcy Russell, plus apparently, and again, we're not trying to be ghoulish here, but there was a rally in bonds when this began. There was certainly a steep decline in stock futures.
Well, that's the safe haven effect. You'll probably see some movement out of the dollar, because anytime a country is sort of the target of a terrorist attack, and Israel has had some experience with this in the past, tends to have an impact first on currency markets, but then you'll see assets move into a safe haven, and long-term treasuries are probably still considered to be a safe haven. I would imagine some other safe haven countries, safe haven currencies worldwide, maybe something like the Swiss franc. You'll probably see movements into those types of currencies, movements out of the dollar right now.
Yeah, I would imagine you would not trade dollars for yen or Deutschmark, since they could easily be targets as well.
I think we've had a little bit of movement into those currencies, but you haven't seen a dramatic swing.
Here again, that was the video of the second plane, and it was a big one.
Mark, we have some more information coming in from the FAA. First, we've learned that all transatlantic flights to the U.S., so within the U.S., are being diverted to Canada. As well, international flights are now being diverted to Canada. Of course, all European flights to the U.S. have been suspended, and all air traffic in the United States has been suspended as well. So
we may never know the answer to this question, but again, you know, you have to wonder, a jetliner captain with a gun to his head, told to crash into a building, what would he probably do? I would imagine he would probably say no. So we have to wonder who flew the planes. Leslie LaRoche is in London and can bring us up to date on what's the reaction and what's going on over there. Leslie?
Mark, these markets have been trading throughout this tragedy, and they are trading substantially lower. The DAX is down 5.5% right now. The CAC in Paris is down 3.3%, and the FTSE is down 2.5%. The DAX was off a sharper 7-8%. We do, as one of your guests was just saying, we have seen a very furious reaction in the foreign exchange markets. The dollar is at 6-month lows against sterling. It's down about 1% against the euro and the yen. In the oil market, so futures contract, front month futures up $2.85, and we have very strong buying in the oil sector. British Petroleum is up 6% right now. Total Fina is up 5%. We do have very sharp selling in the airline sector. British Airways is down 19% right now. EADS, which makes Airbus, down 5.7%. Gold futures were limit up a short time ago. They were up about $8 in the early session, and we have also been watching the insurance sector and the reinsurers. Quite a bit of that business is done here in Europe. We have Swiss Re, which is the second largest reinsurer in the world, down 14% right now. Munich Re down 9%, and Allianz down 8%. We are also waiting for a statement out of the European Union. We had been told that EU would be issuing a statement shortly, and we will get back to you when we have that. Back to you, Mark.
We have an enormous explosion now in the remaining World Trade Tower Center. The second, I believe the North Tower is now gone as well. Yes, it is gone. Both towers of the World Trade Center have been destroyed.
Oh, my goodness.
It happened the same way. The explosion started high in the building and worked its way down. Now, of course, the entire lower section of Manhattan is a disaster zone of unbelievable proportions. I would imagine that at any moment we will hear from that the National Guard is going to be brought in. I mean, this is far beyond anyone's ability, any one agency, to cope with this. Not only do we have in that building any remaining people, but it was, I am certain, full of New York City firefighters, New York City policemen, New York City rescue workers. There you see. I don't understand, and I would be very anxious to hear in the future the forensics of this situation. But both towers, this is an unbelievable day. Both towers of the World Trade Center are now gone. Joining me now is Bill Griffith, my colleague.
As we try to absorb the unthinkable that has happened here, Mark.
This is a situation that...
I mean, we are to maintain some modicum of immunity to all this, but we are humans as well, and it is very, very tough to watch all of this.
The scope is beyond comprehension.
I mean, I came up here 5 minutes ago getting ready to talk about which markets may be closing around the world, but now this is just becoming
they're irrelevant. This is...
Oh, my goodness.
There you see the building imploding. Do you see what's happening?
Yes.
Now, what would cause that? I don't know.
Well, you have... I mean, certainly the structure had been weakened by the impact, but you have to wonder if there was something else there. But we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, but it looks like...
And at this point, I can't imagine we're getting any word anytime soon.
I don't think... I think we're safe. Here I think I'm on safe ground, Bill. I don't think this was clearly... The way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. This is not... It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know. But clearly this is what they wanted to accomplish.
That's what Mark...
What are we looking at now?
That's lower... Is that lower Manhattan?
Is that lower Manhattan from somewhere in New Jersey?
Perspective, perhaps?
Is this the Pentagon? No, that's not the Pentagon. Okay.
No, that's lower Manhattan.
Now you were looking at lower Manhattan.
This is from across the Hudson River here?
This is New York City.
Yes.
Completely obscured.
With
smoke, debris, and my God, the number of people in that area of the city is just... that's
Vesey and West Streets right there, and of course the World Financial Center right next door, and then you've got Tribeca leading up from there. You can't begin to say how many people are in that area, and it is now completely obscured, Mark, by the debris. Maria told us earlier when she was witnessed the first collapse that the sky grew dark, and you can only imagine, well, you can see.
It's something that I've been in this business for 35 years, and I'm not prepared to deal with this.
Well, I don't think anybody is, Mark, at this point.
I don't know. I keep thinking of all of the people in there. I think of the firemen, the policemen, the rescue workers, the people who go into hell to save others, and now apparently all for naught. There you see a shot. This is from the northern end. This is more from Midtown. Those high buildings in the foreground, that's Midtown Manhattan. I think Empire is just barely visible. Perhaps the smoke is beginning to reach Empire State. But you're looking at several square miles of New York completely obscured by all of this. Again, both towers of the World Trade Center collapsing. Attacked first by apparently passenger-laden jetliners hijacked at least one out of Boston. Is
We've heard from the
Out of
one about
Boston,
Boston. We have not heard about the other for some reason.
Correct. As far as we know right now, we have confirmation of 3 separate plane attacks. Only one is confirmed by a U.S. official as a plane hijacking. That was American Airlines Flight 11 that was en route from Boston to Los Angeles, scheduled to arrive at 10:37 a.m. Pacific time.
And then the one allegedly at the Pentagon, we have no word about that as well.
The only detailed information coming in from that is a quote from a witness, and Bill, if you will bear with me, I am looking for that. Here I have it. An Associated Press radio reporter quoted as saying, "I saw the tail of a large airliner. It plowed right into the Pentagon. There is billowing black smoke."
Maybe we should perhaps try a recap. If anybody is now tuning in, especially for those on the West Coast who may be tuning in now for the first time, you've heard bits and pieces. It was about 10 minutes, 15 minutes before 9 a.m. on the East Coast that an explosion was witnessed at the World Trade Center, one of the World Trade Center towers. Mark Haynes, by the way, yeoman's duty, my friend. If you're leaving us, thank you.
Well, I'm just going to step back for
and about 18 minutes later, as we were absorbing the news that it was a jet of some kind, identified as a jet of some kind that had run into the North Tower of World Trade Center, about 18 minutes later, yet a second jet. Indeed, it was a jet that was seen live on television as it rammed into the South Tower. Then we got word that a plane had hit, or at least there had been an explosion at the Pentagon. There's the second jet as it hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center as we were on the air. Now we are...
Bill, we are getting reports from Dow Jones crossed the wires just about 60 seconds ago. Reports of a hijacked plane heading toward Washington.
And we should note that President Bush is not in Washington right
President
now.
Bush is not in Washington. He is en route to Washington right now on Air Force One from Sarasota, Florida. He cut short a trip there. But Bill, I'm sorry, I did not mean to.
That's fine. I'm not logged in. Let me do that now so I can be up to date along with you. That's a picture of the Pentagon, as I understand it now, in Washington, where eyewitnesses say they saw the tail end of a plane as it crashed into the Pentagon complex there, southwest of downtown Washington, which, as we know, is sort of in the traffic pattern of Reagan National Airport.
And all flights in the U.S. have been grounded. And Alina, I think you told us earlier that European authorities, German authorities, had shut down flights to the U.S. Is that correct?
That is correct. They've been suspended, and international flights have been, transatlantic flights have been diverted to Canada. We should mention that the White House has been evacuated. As you look at this just incredible picture in New York, the White House has been evacuated amid terrorist threats there, or a terrorist threat there. The Capitol has been evacuated. The U.S. Treasury has been evacuated. We want to mention, not to be forgotten, that about 15 minutes ago we got a report from the Associated Press that a car bomb had exploded outside the U.S. State Department. There are reports of a plane crashing into the Pentagon, according to witnesses and according to the Associated Press. There was also a Dow Jones report of a second explosion at the Pentagon that NBC has yet to confirm. We wanted to remind you that both World Trade Center towers have collapsed amid at least 2 plane attacks on the towers, one on each at least.
And Alina, for those who are not familiar with New York City, and some of our viewers may not have been to New York City, the towers were really considered the entrance to the financial district, and they are two, obviously, or were two landmarks to the city. where most of the financial doings in the city began. That was kind of the gateway to the financial community. We should note that all of the exchanges have been making statements about whether or not they will be trading, how they are going to handle this particular situation, and we are, of course, monitoring that particular part of the story, which we do here at CNBC, but obviously this disaster we are going to continue to cover for you throughout the day.
We are getting word that London's Canary Wharf building, the large office complex there east of London, is being evacuated at this point as well. NBC's Pat Dawson, I was told we were going to have him. Apparently he'll be ready shortly. I'm also getting word, Sue, right now off the wire. A story out of Pittsburgh has it on the AP wire that a large plane has crashed in western Pennsylvania. Officials at Pittsburgh's Somerset County Airport have confirmed that as well. All right, to NBC's Pat Dawson, who is on the ground in New York City. Let's listen in.
As we say, the emergency workers now beginning to try to gather themselves. Over there you can see a police emergency service unit. They're trying basically now to reestablish some kind of a safe perimeter. And many of the emergency workers basically just happy to be alive. Certainly that picture tells it all. Many of them just happy to be alive at this point, having survived what is an extraordinary event, the collapse of 2 towers. As we said earlier in our report, 110 stories each. I will tell you that what I saw fall had to be at least 40, 50 stories of that building at first. The skeleton was left at about, I would say, the 50 or 60th floor after the shell, after the structure of the building fell down. The skeleton, the steel skeleton, was literally sheaved off, and it took probably about another 30 seconds before the skeleton collapsed into the street. That was the last.
Let's break away from Pat Dawson, if we can, for a moment. Lester Holt here at MSNBC World Headquarters. From the Associated Press, Dateline Pittsburgh, large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. They're citing officials at the Somerset County Airport who confirm it. Again, AP reporting and citing the Somerset County Airport. A large plane crashes in western Pennsylvania. That is all we have. This comes quite a time after the FAA put essentially a ground stop. All airplanes in the air were allowed to continue to their destinations, but every commercial airport in the country right now is closed. But again, the news just gets worse and worse. A large plane crashing in western Pennsylvania. NBC's Ashley Banfield is in Lower Manhattan, the scene of the chaos that you're watching unfold live. Ashley, what have you learned? What can you see?
I don't know how to describe this. I don't know what to tell you first. But when that building came down, we were a couple of blocks. You all right? And I'm fine, thank you. Are you okay?
What's the glasses coming in?
An incredible cloud of debris and smoke completely engulfed us. We couldn't breathe. We broke down the door to a building just to get out from the cloud. We couldn't breathe.
Go in there.
Thank you. No, we couldn't breathe. We couldn't see. It was pitch black. We're just going into a corner restaurant that's allowing us. And it was as though I swear I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen anything like this. This whole place looks like a war zone. There's debris everywhere. It's hard to breathe. And when that cloud came at us, I could feel it, the force of it. And it was as though, an instinct took over. We just had to breathe. And
Ashley, we're gonna let you collect yourself.
Right.
Obviously, the priority to anyone who was watching in the New York City area. Stay safe. Ashley, get to safety. We will talk to you in a bit. We want to get to Pat Dawson again, who is on the west side of the Trade Center, who was covering the scene from there.
At least a dozen emergency workers this morning, police and fire. The loss of life, in the words of one, has to be terrible. There's just simply no way around it. And that, obviously, if we start just with the people who are on those 2 planes. The other thing which we have seen this morning, which we rarely, if ever, see here on the island of Manhattan, that is, we have been circled several times by Air Force jets. We assume they are Air Force, going overhead at, I would say, probably about 10 to 12,000 feet. Obviously, at this point, New York's airspace is closed, and I think it's being pointed out to me now that Is that what you see, another plane there? No. Okay. I'm sorry? You can see the towers. You can see the towers now from where you're standing. Yeah, actually, that's the building just in front. I don't know if in the television picture you can see through it, and I'm not sure that building that we can see there is actually the World Trade Center or the building that is just a block north of it. But that's just now we are getting our first view, probably a good 15 minutes after that North Tower came down, our first view of this situation, so that we can begin to see at least something of what it looks like down there. Wing, if you can get a shot down at street level, you can more or less see what we saw here. There was an enormous dust cloud that came up this broad boulevard here in the moments after that tower collapsed.
We're going to cut away from Pat Dawson on the west side of the Trade Towers. NBC's Rick Sanchez joins us on the phone. He's also in Lower Manhattan. Rick, what do you got?
Well, here's the most desperate situation for these people. I just had 5 firefighters come to me, many of them in tears because they've lost so many of their fellow firefighters, and one of them, as I was listening, had his radio on, Lester, and you could literally hear firefighters that are still trapped in all that rubble crying, saying things like, "Get me out, someone get to me." The sense here is that there are still people somehow in that rubble. Some of them may be firefighters, as well as some of the other office workers who usually work in that building. The firefighters, as you might imagine, are extremely desperate about this situation. People that
Rick, I'm going to have to break away from you. We're getting more information on the situation in Pittsburgh. Let me read directly off the Associated Press. A large plane crashed just north of the Somerset County Airport, 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. The plane, I just lost it on my screen, believed to be a I've lost it on my screen. Believed to be a 767 is what I think I read there. But again, let's see. Kim's bringing me more information. Here it is. All right. Believed to be a 767 crashed about 10 o'clock Eastern time, 8 miles west of Jennerstown, according to 911 dispatchers. We don't know the airline, but again, here's a look at a Boeing 767. This is a big airplane. In fact, this is a 400 model. You're looking at the newest and largest, but traditionally the 767, most of those in use carry about 250 people. A wide-body airplane often used on transcontinental flights, also transatlantic. It is 10:45 right now on the East Coast. We need to update you, especially if you were just waking up, just tuning in. It is a day of catastrophe from Washington to New York and now to Pennsylvania in what appear to be a series of coordinated terrorist attacks. You're looking at a live picture of Lower Manhattan, and no longer do we see the World Trade Centers, both hit by airplanes. Here is one of those that we saw live. There it is highlighted, what appeared to be another 767 that crashed into one of the towers directly through, obviously flown directly and purposefully into the Trade Center. Let's go back to Greg and Chris now.
You are watching NBC News coverage here on MSNBC.
On CNBC at this moment.
Let me summarize if you are just now joining us.
We're breaking in here on CNBC to continue our coverage now. Bill Griffith along with Sue Herrera, where we're getting word, a few things to bring you up to date on right now, a few points to be made. There had been word that perhaps a car bomb had been exploded outside the State Department building. The State Department is denying that. I should also, since we cover business news, try to bring in some of that as well. Trading in London in the oil exchange there has been halted. Now stock trading in Toronto has just been halted as well. And as we get more word on other kinds of trading outside the United States, we will bring that to you as well.
As a matter of fact, the Securities and Exchange Commission, Bill, making a statement just a short while ago saying that there will be no trading at the major U.S. exchanges today. They will not open today. Maria Bartiromo, however, has been in the financial district all morning. She's now live at the New York Stock Exchange. Maria, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sue. Well, basically, clearly the city has come to a halt in New York. I am on Wall Street. I have been down here and witnessed 2 of the explosions. Now, the first explosion that I witnessed was the second plane going into the second tower. I was outside. Frankly, I ran for my life. It was like a movie, a plane going right into the top of the World Trade Center, the second tower. The whole Wall Street area, Broadway, Wall Street, Broad Street, was filled with people. Everyone just ran. There was a lot of debris coming at all of us. In fact, things were coming from the building, metal pieces as well as papers We all ran. The second explosion that I witnessed was about 10 a.m., and that was, in retrospect, the collapse of that tower. And again, debris came at us. The whole area turned pitch black. All we could see was smoke. We couldn't even breathe practically. We were closing our eyes. I actually went under the building across the New York Stock Exchange. There were steps which I just stayed in the stairwell as a place to just to hide. And then when I thought that it was quieted down, I made my way back into the New York Stock Exchange. Basically, people are just scared. They are waiting down wherever they can find some safety. I can tell you that everyone who works at the New York Stock Exchange is safe. There have been no fatalities there. So anyone who is trying to reach anyone who may work here at the exchange, know that they are safe and they are in a spot where we hope is secure at this point. But again, there is clouds outside. It's basically very, very dark. You see that from afar, but when you're in the thick of it, which is where we are right now, it is pitch black because you are basically surrounded by smoke and surrounded by debris coming at you. Earlier, we also actually saw bodies coming out of the top of the World Trade Center. Now, I'm not sure if people were jumping or it was just bodies that were, I'm not sure what they were, but there are witnesses who saw bodies coming out of the top of the tower. So this is really quite extraordinary and quite disgusting, obviously, but we are here, and I will report back once I get more information.
Maria, are you in contact at all with the New York Stock Exchange officials?
Yes.
And we've learned from the SEC they're not going to trade today. But
no, there is no trading, Bill. I am positive that there will be no trading.
Are they going to try to evacuate the whole building there?
Well, at one point, that's what the thought process was, that it was better to evacuate. And then, in retrospect, that wasn't the case because everyone who went outside, including myself, were subject to large explosions, very loud explosions that were accompanied by heavy, heavy smoke. We could not breathe. People are wearing white masks to cover themselves. I don't know if you could actually get a shot, but I'm covered in soot. And this is better. I already tried to clean myself off, but just standing outside a couple of blocks away, and I was just overtaken by smoke and debris. So that's the game plan. People are not waiting outside. They're finding a secure place elsewhere.
Understandably so. Thank you, Maria. We'll be getting back to you in just a few minutes. Scott Wapner joins us right now. Scott, we know that the U.S. airspace has been shut down and that European flights to the United States have been suspended. But you have some updates on airport closures for us as well and evacuations.
Well, just across the AP wires, it's known now that Pittsburgh airports, all area airports in the city of Pittsburgh, have been evacuated. I also wanted to stay on that theme of touching base with what's going on in the financial centers around the country. We understand that the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, the Chicago Board of Trade will suspend all trading at 10:15. I believe that is Central Time, so in about 20 to 25 minutes from now, here on the East Coast.
We also should note that the U.S. dollar is getting hit very, very hard. It is now down 1 3/4% against the yen, which puts it below the 119 level of the yen. Now, obviously, the financial reaction to this situation is being felt. It is obviously not the primary story, certainly. However, we want to keep you abreast of that because one of the targets was the financial district here in the United States with the World Trade Center, both towers now having collapsed.
And as a precautionary measure, you see there on the lower third screen that they have evacuated the airports in Boston and Pittsburgh. Around the Pittsburgh area there, the plane crashed there of about 45 minutes ago, and then out of Boston, we know the FBI has told us that it was an American Airlines flight out of Boston that was bound for Los Angeles. It was hijacked. One of the planes that actually ran into the World Trade Center tower.
And earlier this morning, if you're just joining us, a quick recap if you're tuning in from the West Coast. It was just about 9 a.m. When the first attack occurred on the World Trade Center. A plane went into the World Trade Center. Then about 18 minutes after that, a second plane went in. We were able to see that on the air. It was a horrific sight, obviously. Both towers of the World Trade Center have collapsed. Trading in the United States has been suspended. The dollar is falling against the major foreign currencies, specifically against the Japanese yen. We have had an attack on the Pentagon. We have words that now, according to NBC News, the top anti-terror officials are moving to the State Department Training Center, which is located in Arlington, Virginia, that the State Department is evacuating right now, and they are moving all key personnel to the State Department Training Center, that according to NBC News. Bill?
We're getting word of other stock exchanges around the world. According to what I'm just hearing is they've reopened trading in Mexico in the stock market there. And I'm getting word that all federal buildings have been evacuated in Washington. We're looking at a picture of the Pentagon right now. We're getting some live pictures for the first time, a close-up of the Pentagon complex there, which it was roughly an hour after the World Trade Center attacks, if we want to call it that at this point, pretty safe to say, that the Pentagon was subject to a similar attack, with eyewitnesses saying that they saw the tail end of a jet plow into the office complex there, the Pentagon complex.
We should note, since we are focusing at that point on Washington, that is a live picture from the New Jersey side of the New York skyline, where the World Trade Center's towers were. Obviously, you can see that there's an enormous amount of smoke. It is a disaster. We should note that in Washington, when the Pentagon was hit, President Bush was not there. He was out of Washington. He is headed back to Washington. And the State Department now is evacuating and moving to the State Department Training Center in Arlington, Virginia.
I'm getting a rundown now of some of the precautions being taken in various states around the country as a result of this. In Virginia, Navy installations in the Hampton Roads area, which is home of the large naval base there, have been placed in an increased security condition called ThreatCon Charlie. So they're putting them under alert.
Bill, we're just getting word that a third plane has crashed into the Pentagon.
I saw that, but I think we were looking at a live picture of the Pentagon, and it didn't seem to be the case. But
this is being passed on to me from Melina Cho, who got it from the alerts at NBC News. We also should note that there is some statements coming out of London, and the Israeli embassy in London has been evacuated. Obviously, there is global reaction to the disaster that is occurring here in the United States.
We had also mentioned, of course, that one of the planes that is believed to have crashed into the World Trade Center was an American Airlines jet. We now understand that American Airlines officials in Dallas, where the company is headquartered, are going to hold a news conference shortly. So it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll get some more information on the passenger count on that jet.
Let me, if I may, Scott, more on what's happening in the other parts of the country as a result of this. For those who may be tuning in Minneapolis, the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport has been shut down. The IDS Center in downtown Minneapolis, the tallest building in Minnesota, has been evacuated. In Georgia, all flights at Hartsfield, Atlanta, which, as we know, is now the nation's busiest airport, all flights at Hartsfield have been stopped. In Maryland, officials have tightened security throughout the state. In North Carolina, military bases have prepared for possible change in status. In Pennsylvania, Philadelphia International Airport has been closed, and we know about the crash near the Pittsburgh airport. In Colorado, city and state officials have stepped up security around the government buildings there. The city opened an emergency prepared office in the basement of City Hall, where representatives of police, fire, and health agencies are convening at this point. And in California, the state has been put on high alert by Governor Davis. In Tennessee, the Department of Energy's nuclear weapons and research complex in Oak Ridge has been put under heightened security. In Kentucky, the Southern Governors Association canceled its annual meeting. And in West Virginia, a chemical plant security has been heightened there. Flights out of Charleston's Yeager Airport, which is the largest airport in West Virginia, have been suspended. So it is clear that air traffic in the United States, for all intents and purposes, has been shut down.
And we also have word that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce building at The Hague has been evacuated, so we are seeing global reaction to this. Bill, we also have an expert with us on the phone. George Eisen, who is a terrorist expert at William Patterson College, joins us. Professor Eisen, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Your reaction, please, and how this could happen.
This is such a coordinated activity that it had to have an extremely highly sophisticated infrastructure to carry this one out. obviously, when I was talking to you, there's no such a thing terrorist aspect in such a magnitude. As I'm watching myself, this is a tragedy beyond description.
Should we be surprised by this, Professor Eisen? I mean, this has long been the fear that there would be something of this magnitude, but we were told at the same time that perhaps security officials would know about it ahead of time. So as Sue said, how could something like this happen?
I'm returning again to my earlier point. The sophistication of this entire enterprise leaves me speechless. The coordination. It cannot be just a lone cowboy who is just riding into the Twin Towers per se. What's happening for me, the ultimate puzzle is how possible to hijack.
That's what I was going to ask you, because it is not simply one hijacked airplane, obviously, that we are talking about. You bring up the issue of a coordinated effort. It is almost unbelievable. One doesn't want to speculate, certainly that's not what we're here to do, but can you give me any perspective on how something like that could happen?
If we're looking into the possible organizations that can pull through this kind of thing, they have to have, any organization must have an infrastructure here in the United States. And I very strongly believe, and I am not even venturing to guess if it's the whole enterprise is from the Middle East, at least in origin. But the infrastructure here in the United States had to be there.
Can you give us some insight, Professor, if you know at all, since you are billed as a terrorist expert, what the U.S. response, what may be happening right now? Are security experts contacting people around the world? Are we trying to figure out where this may be coming from, and what might they be doing about it right now?
I am sure that both the FBI and the CIA they are already working on the leads. I think what they need to look into is the origin. One is in Boston. Another one is, of course, in New Jersey, Newark, as I understand. And I'm relying only on the newscasts. So they're already trying to figure out. I really believe it will be solved. It's too large of an operation. Very sophisticated again. But it will be definitely solved.
What does this tell us about U.S. security?
I do not believe that a foolproof security can be achieved. It never been achieved in the Middle East, definitely not in France when the terrorist bombing went on in the 70s, definitely not in Great Britain, and so forth. There is no foolproof. What can be done, however, on this for me the puzzle here, how possible for jetliners hijacked.
Professor Eisen, what about the global implications of this? We have seen some reaction from some of our U.S. allies overseas. We've seen some evacuations. Obviously, today the target is the United States, but what are the global implications of this?
I don't believe that, in spite of the sophistication what we see, that it will have global implications. American
even for the U.S.'s closest allies?
Well, the U.S. closest allies at this point is Israel, and they are already in a heightened alert. I think the most important point, which already is taken place, has been taken place, is securing U.S. installations around the world. I think this is a main concern, and as I understand, I'm listening to their telecasts. They already undertaking in The Hague and undertaking in various capitals.
Professor Eisen, thank you.
It's a pleasure.
George Eisen of William Patterson University in Patterson, New Jersey. Two more things, Sue. The CBC in Canada is reporting that the Canadian government is shortly to announce that all Canadian airports are going to be shut down for the foreseeable future. and we're getting word more about other evacuations of major skyscrapers in other metropolitan areas of the United States, including the Trade Center in downtown Dallas,
and
Texas.
Actually, New York's Mayor Rudolph Giuliani has called for the evacuation of all of Lower Manhattan, which obviously is in chaos this morning.
We have
go to Hampton.
Hampton Pearson, our correspondent in Washington, with more on what's happening there right now. Hampton?
Well, Bill and Sue, as we get more and more information on the dimensions, if you will, and the ripple effect of this terrorist nightmare. Number one, the FAA now says that all inbound international flights headed for the U.S. are now in the process of being diverted to Canada. Now, of course, that dovetails with the information, Bill, that you just had, that we are expecting an announcement very shortly from Canadian officials that at the same time they are planning to shut down all of their major airports. Of course, here in Washington, D.C. itself, much of the focus is on the Pentagon, where it is now believed that a third plane involved in what appears to be this coordinated terrorist attack crashed into the Pentagon several hours ago. At any given time, as many as 30,000 people a day, military and civilian, work inside that five-sided building. All of the rescue efforts are still underway there, and they're still assessing damage. We are now told that an earlier report of a possible car bomb outside the State Department, the State Department is in essence knocking that one down, saying it did not happen. At the same time, we're told the State Department itself is among basically all of the federal buildings here in Washington that are now in the process of being evacuated, including the Capitol, the Treasury, the State Department, as we mentioned, the CIA over in Langley, Virginia, and the NSA, the super secret intelligence apparatus, if you will, in suburban Maryland. Also here in the nation's capital, the Metropolitan Subway System, a lifeline that carries over 200,000 commuters a day, is also being in the process of being shut down. A few hours ago, or an hour or so ago, we were told that at IMF World Bank headquarters buildings here in D.C., basically people are being given the option as to whether or not to stay or go. So the nation's capital, nowhere near the magnitude of what's happening in New York City, but is in the process basically of being shut down. Back to you.
Pearson in Washington there, and you, as a matter of fact, you are looking at a live picture. You were looking at a live picture of Washington. That is a live picture of New York. Scott, you're back with us now, and before we give a timeline and recap for people who may just be joining us, you have some information on injuries, and there are many of them.
Well, many of the injured were being rushed, of course, to the closest hospitals in the city of New York, and we understand that many of the victims were suffering from severe burns, but there are reports that many lives perhaps were saved because once the first building was attacked, the second one was immediately evacuated. So perhaps a number of people were able to get out of the second of the two twin towers. I also wanted to update a little bit of what Hampton was saying.
And this is tape from earlier this morning for those of you who are just joining us.
And you can see the gaping hole in one of those trade centers, and that was the second plane hitting. We understand that all federal buildings in Metro D.C. and New York City are closed, and federal facilities here in New York are on what they call level 4 out of 5. We're going to take a close-up here of that plane hitting. That was the second plane hitting one of the twin towers.
We should probably go through the timeline. For those of you who are just joining us, you were looking at tape from earlier this morning. Here's how it happened. At about 9 a.m. or shortly before that, a plane crashed into the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. About 18 to 20 minutes after that, you see that explosion at the lower part of your screen just above our ticker. That is the second plane that crashed into the World Trade Center. President Bush was in Sarasota, Florida. He calls the crash an apparent terrorist attack. That was the collapse of the Trade Center tower, the South Tower, which we shot earlier this morning here on CNBC in our live pictures. Government buildings in Washington, including the Capitol and the White House, have been evacuated. The North Tower of the Trade Center collapsed about an hour or so after the South Tower collapsed.
Which is something I want to get into here, Sue, because there's been all kinds of speculation about how that would happen, whether there would be necessary for further attack upon the buildings before they would collapse. And as it happens, we have with us in studio here is a structural engineer, Eric Gass, who happens to be in the process of building a building that we're putting together here at CNBC down the road. And you would have some sense, since you've been a part of the construction of buildings of this magnitude, Eric, to give us some insight of what would happen with the kind of damage that was done with the jet attacks on the buildings, and whether that's enough to bring those buildings down by themselves.
Well, I think you've got a couple of issues that are going on here. One is these are concrete reinforced structures, and concrete is a compressive material. So as you can see, especially from the second attack, as it comes in, it appears to shear into the side of the building.
The plane.
So absolutely. So you have a couple of issues. One, it probably has taken all of the concrete away from the steel.
And now you're seeing that second plane.
Absolutely. So this structure, and I think as you see, as it will collapse in the later on, it begins to tilt to that side. It has taken all of the concrete and put it into tensile property.
And these are large planes.
Absolutely. If we're dealing with a Boeing 767, you're not just dealing with a large plane. You're dealing with a large plane that's coming in at over 500 miles an hour. So you have all of the impact going into those members. There is no building that I'm aware of that can take this kind of impact.
As we watched the first of the towers collapsing there, it was enough from the initial the initial attack by the jet to bring that jet, the tower down eventually. Is that what you're saying?
I would say so, yeah. Especially the second thing that you would have going on is, of course, the airplane is going to have a great deal of fuel, and the fire is going to be working against that structural steel, which is, of course, why the fire codes are so stringent in this country. So then you're going to have a problem with, once the fire takes place, it's going to work against the structural strength of that steel and begin to collapse.
If I can just interrupt, we're getting more information. The plane that crashed in Pennsylvania originated in Chicago. It was headed to Cleveland. There were 90 people on board. That comes from WPIX.
Whether that is related to anything that's been going on today,
correct.
It would
we
be
do not know that
the
yet.
Most incredible of coincidences if it's not. But
that's true, but we do not know if that is the case.
So you're not surprised that these would go down just based on the jet crashing into the buildings here, Eric?
No, as a matter of fact, as we were seeing the explosion the first time, that was the first thing that had occurred to us, is that there would be an immediate weakening on that side of the building. I think if you look at the second tower that collapsed, you will see that it begins to collapse straight down, which, as it appears from what happened in the impact, it impacted much more into the center of the building. Again, you would have gotten rid of all of the ability for fire protection to have gotten rid of some of the fire and the flames, which apparently is why it took longer. The other point, too, is that you have 15 floors of extremely heavy material bearing down on this situation. It would be impossible to see why it would be able to hold up.
Eric, if I can interrupt you, please. Canada has basically closed its airspace, but they are going to allow U.S. diverted planes who may be in the air at this point to land at their airports for humanitarian purposes. But U.S. airspace, for all intents and purposes, has been closed by the FAA. Go ahead, Eric.
The terrorist bombing of some years ago against the World Trade Center, which occurred essentially in the parking structure below the building. Right. Why didn't that bring that down at the time?
Well, I think you're dealing with a totally different issue. One, you're dealing with a static explosion where somebody pulls a small truck in underneath, so you have all of the concrete not only keeping both of the floors above and below, but you're dealing with the biggest structural strength of that building is sitting underground. Of course, New York is pure bedrock, so that would have been the worst place to attack it, which clearly it did not do that much damage enough structurally to make major structural problems with it, as I understand. Here, you have a much larger vehicle with much more speed and literally shearing any of its structural capacity in those particular areas.
United Airlines parent UAL has now put a ground stop on all of its operations worldwide. We don't know whether other airlines will follow that. UAL is the parent corporation of United Airlines. It has put a ground stop on all of its operations worldwide. Bill?
We're looking at a live picture now of the Pentagon, which, of course, is not a skyscraper, but it is the world's largest office complex with the number of people who work there in the Defense Department, where we have learned that perhaps a third jet did crash into that building as well. It was described earlier, I heard Democratic consultant Paul Begala had been quoted as saying that he saw a fireball emerge from the Pentagon when it happened roughly an hour following the attacks on the World Trade Center bombings this morning.
In terms of the financial markets impact, as we told you, there will be no trading at the New York Stock Exchange. Mr. McDonough, the New York Fed president, is on the Dow Jones news wires as saying that all central bankers are trying to remain calm, that the New York Fed will conduct or make every effort at normal business in today's activity.
Speaking of normal business, the London Stock Exchange, I mentioned the oil exchange, the IPE, has suspended trading in London, but the stock exchange there, which is due to trade another 47 minutes, will remain open for trade and will close at the normal time at the London Stock Exchange.
Scott, can you bring us up to date on what you have?
Absolutely. Well, we understand that as long as 3 weeks ago, when you start talking about when you see a disaster like this and terrorist attacks, the first question is, well, who could be responsible for something like this? And we understand, as perhaps 3 weeks ago, Osama bin Laden, the known terrorist, was threatening major U.S. attacks, unprecedented U.S. attacks. Of course, there's no confirmation that he or his organization was involved in this. But we'll certainly be monitoring the wires to see if any more information comes out about that. But certainly that's the top name that would come up to most terrorist experts here in the United States.
I'm just learning on the wires here that the Taliban in Afghanistan has called a news conference there. In Pakistan, they've called it following those attacks. So maybe we'll learn something along those lines.
Let's join MSNBC, of course, our sister network. They have been following this all morning with us as well. Let's listen in at the Pentagon.
10,000 people in each tower. 10,000 people in each tower would typically be in there on a normal business day. And we get about another 5,000 visitors during the course of the entire day. So by 8:30, 9 o'clock, the building should have been full.
Okay, so in other words, by 8:30 to 9, you figure the building would have been approaching full capacity with the workers. So we are talking about roughly 10,000 people.
Per tower.
Per tower. Now, at this point, obviously, you've got a situation, these towers having collapsed, that is bordering on chaotic. What's the first challenge? What are you doing at this moment? I've seen emergency workers try to go in there after the first couple crashes and come running back out. What are you trying to do now?
I guess the next step is between the chief and myself and my staff. We're going to go assess the condition and determine whether it's safe or not to send personnel into the building to continue looking and evacuating people.
Are there any emergency workers in there now?
We don't know that. We don't know.
If they were in there now, presumably they would have been trapped in there from the earlier.
It's possible. It's possible from what we saw happen here. Yeah, very much so. We were trapped ourselves in the building, in the basement. We were the building collapsed when we came out of that. But yes,
you were in the basement of the South Tower.
No, we were in the basement of building 5, 6.
Okay.
Right,
yeah.
and I was in building 5. We had to dig our way out to get out.
You dug your way out. What was that like?
Scary, but I was a volunteer fireman for years, so you learn not to panic.
We're going to move
What
from
was
Pat,
the one
NBC's
last thing?
Pat
What
Dawson.
was the?
We've just been able to get a camera hooked up to Ashley Banfield. And Ashley, tell us where you are and what's happening.
I'm on West Broadway.
I'm on West Broadway right now. It's kind of hard to say, West Broadway, Reed Street. But if you look down here, follow me down, you can see what it looks like finally, Chris. Down West Broadway into that plume of smoke. That was where those World Trade Centers once stood. And you can see people milling all about. Emergency vehicles are trying to get through this area. Police are trying to wrangle people to clear the way so that they can get through. Just look at the ground. Look at all the debris everywhere. The dust, the mess. A lot of the emergency vehicles that have been going through. This is a Fort Lee ambulance, so obviously they're calling in from every district surrounding the New York area. We've seen sheriff's vehicles. We've seen Port Authority acting as traffic supervisors and trying to wrangle people out of the way. But this is incredible because now sort of the sun has come out and it looks almost surreal in this area because right down there, if you can see into that plume of cloud, that's where we were when I did my first report with you on the cell phone about 35 minutes ago when the first tower collapsed. We were hit with that plume of smoke. I don't know if you can even see from my clothing, but this is what a lot of the people looked like when they were coming out of that area, out of that plume of smoke. In fact, is it Mr. Borden? You were in the area when this happened. Tell me what happened.
I was walking by the building and early in the morning, and there was a loud cracking noise. And all of a sudden, this guy looked up and screamed, and I thought he was joking. And I looked up, and all sorts of pieces of the building were coming off the building. And so we started running, and pieces of the building started falling like 20 foot in front of us, and there was nowhere to go in the whole.
Did you get hit with anything?
No,
Did you run?
Yeah, we ran and fell under thing, and then we came back and we were walking around the other side, and the other building blew, and I pulled a woman underneath a truck because all the debris was falling down then, and now they both collapsed. There's no more World Trade Centers.
And what happened to you? Was there emergency personnel who looked you over to help you out? Did you just escape the area as fast as possible?
No, I just walked around and see if anybody else was okay, because I was okay.
This is where you work every day?
Yeah. Down on Wall Street. Yeah, I'm in shock.
All right, thank you. Just want to clear this area, please. Because obviously every time a vehicle goes through here, it's extremely dusty. This is about 10 to 15 blocks north of the Trade Center here. And the ambulances personnel were handing out these masks for people to wear, but they're obviously in very short supply. We tried to grab about 15 different ambulance workers at times and ask for masks, whether they were ambulance or whether they were police. There's just none available. We also saw some police officers coming down this street a little bit earlier on wearing full gas masks, almost like riot gear. They were heading into that area. What's so frightening at this time is that we've heard 3 explosions since both towers collapsed. I stopped another police officer. He was a New York City police officer who was working traffic in this area to ask him if he'd heard over his radio transmissions whether in fact those were car bombs, as one officer had told me, or whether he'd heard anything else. He said he thought they were just residual collapse sounds and explosions that were just from the original collapse, but we haven't had confirmation on that. The first officer that I did get the information from that was a car bomb looked as though he was an inspector, plain clothes of some sort. He had a radio as well and a cell phone. It was walking right past me down this area, and I walked with him as he was talking on the cell phone. I said, "What was it?" And he said, "Car bomb." And when I asked him to elaborate, he said, no time, and he continued to walk forward. The concern is that there are so many emergency vehicles and emergency personnel that went down into that World Trade Center area, obviously cordoning it off and trying to keep people out of there. But clearly they would have been right in that path of not only the falling debris, but also that incredible, powerful cloud that just engulfed us. And I think if you heard me earlier, I told you the only way for us to escape it at the time was to break down the entrance to an apartment building just off the street. We had to break through the glass and get into the second door to breathe. We were followed by a police officer as well who was struggling to breathe, and then a security guard who worked in the World Trade Center as well. And he had been trying to walk northward away from that mess behind us. Could you just clear back so that the camera can take a view down there? Thanks. You can shoot down and you can see some of the activity while I'm reporting this to you. We also were able to interview a security guard who was working on the Concord and the plaza between the two World Trade Centers when the first explosion happened, when the first plane hit the first tower. He said he was dispatched down to the concourse to clear people away and to try to move people out of the World Trade Center. And then he said that's when the second explosion happened, which of course was the second tower. He said everything went pitch black. There was a cloud of smoke and a cloud of debris. When we happened upon him, it was extremely strange. He was all dressed in his black security uniform, but he was fully covered from head to toe in gray and wandering aimlessly. He said he was okay.
Hold on
we asked him if he'd been attended to.
If you can, because Pat Dawson, who's not far from you, is being asked to move.
All right, Tom, we've just been told we're being evacuated. You can see all the emergency workers walking north on the West Side Highway in New York. We've been told by firefighters here that there is a report of a bomb in this building. This is a school, a high school right here. And as you can see, they're moving everybody away from this building. They've said that there's a bomb in the building. They are evacuating us north now. That is according to firefighters on the scene, and we're going to move out of here right now just to keep ourselves safe. So we're going to start walking north ourselves. But that's what we're being told by New York City firefighters here, that there were reports of a bomb in that high school right there. It's called Stuyvesant High School. And so we are walking north to get out of the way. You can see just to my left here, these are even the ambulances which were down there are being moved north. The firefighters are being moved north. Everybody is being moved north. We're being asked by the police now to go north and get out of the way. Officer, do you have any idea of what the problem is?
There's a report of a secondary device possibly in the area of this school, so they're going to move everybody back as a precaution.
Secondary device meaning a bomb?
Possibly.
Okay, and where did that report come from? Was it called in?
It came in over our radios, and it's reported through our supervisors on down, so we're pulling everybody back.
And that's in the Stuyvesant High School right there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Officer McQuaid. That's Officer McQuaid of New York City Emergency Service. I'm sorry, what's it?
We are going to take it back here at CNBC. Bill Griffith along with Sue Herrera. A few more bits of information that we're getting. Obviously, we'll go back to MSNBC on the ground there in New York City as developments warrant it. Let me bring a couple things in. Sue, you have some things as well.
I do. As a matter of fact, the FBI is now saying that the 4 hijacked planes were American Airlines flight number 11 and 77 and United Airlines flight number 175 and 93. And Scott
Wapner has more developments on one of those hijacked flights.
Well, let's also look at some passenger counts from those planes. American Airlines Flight 11 was one of the ones believed to have crashed into the World Trade Center. We believe that was a Boeing 767 with 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. American Airlines Flight 77 was believed to be en route from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles, a Boeing 757 with 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. United Flight 175, there is no information at this time as to how many passengers were on board. The other United plane involved, number 93, was believed to be en route from Newark to San Francisco. And this could be the plane. This is believed to be the plane that crashed outside of Pittsburgh. And we understand that about 9:58 Eastern Time, this is being reported by WPXI television in Pittsburgh, that a 911 center got a phone call from a cell phone from the plane saying, in fact, that the plane was hijacked. There was an explosion, a cloud of white smoke, and of course, the phone then went dead.
And Scott, before we go to Leslie LaRoche, our correspondent in London, U.S. officials are telling NBC News that the U.S. Army units have been placed on their highest state of alert. That would be ThreatCon Delta for protection purposes. This means armed troops and armored vehicles will be protecting U.S. bases and facilities throughout Europe, and we are going to get more on that as it develops. That from NBC News from U.S. officials.
Sue, let me mention that in about 5 minutes, the Afghani ambassador representing the Taliban government is going to hold a news conference. Sources in Afghanistan say that they will deny any link or knowledge that known terrorist Osama bin Laden would be involved. And as far as they are concerned, he is banned from carrying out activities against anyone. Now, we should take this with a huge grain of salt because there are administration officials who are saying that if we are to believe that this is a coordinated attack, and there really is no reason to believe it isn't, given the timing of all of this today, that administration officials are saying that it should be considered a coordinated attack on the scale that an organization put together by Osama bin Laden would be capable of carrying out if, in fact, that's what this is.
American Airlines is now making a statement saying that it did officially lose 2 aircraft carrying a total of 156 people. We updated you on those flight numbers earlier.
This week on Access Hollywood.